Hi everyone, welcome to the exercise video for Mindset 7. Obviously with running all of the books internally, we don't necessarily do release schedules for people because that's what we do for them. So this is just a quick document that we've put together internally to help people who want to take a DIY approach to this particular mindset. So we're going to take a quick look. This is only going to be a brief video because it's relatively self-explanatory. But what we're going to do is take a quick look at the template that we've got set up. The idea here is really just to keep this moving. The whole purpose of the mindsets, like we've said, is really dialing in the scope and then doing as much as possible to keep it moving so that the project gets created. So the release templates that we've got is really working back from this date that we've picked as the date that we want to go live, just to really give you an idea of the timelines and some ideas for a framework and planning. So the key thing is, as we said in the explainer video, is to really think about that key date, the scope constrained date of when you want to get it released, because by having that line in the sand, you've got a target to aim for, and then the content template that we'll look at in a second, the release template, is then going to allow you to fill in some dates and work back from that. So one of the useful things to do is, once you've got it filled in, is to really look for any conflicts. And if a piece of work, we're recording this in the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, so obviously if I've scheduled some important work to do over that 2-week period, then I might need to readjust that schedule depending on other commitments, or depending on what I've got going on, that might be a great time to do it because other pieces of work might be quiet. So once you've identified the dates, you've worked back in terms of the blocks of time needed, you've then added the dates, the actual calendar dates. Great exercise just to run through and look for conflicts and really capture that, take the time to capture those release activity ideas now, so that again, you don't get caught out by some unexpected planning. You've probably experienced this yourself, but what we see quite often is people will commit to a deadline on some activity that we need them to do. Something will happen in the real world to knock them off that schedule, and then all of a sudden it's then weeks and weeks later, because it takes some time to get back into the framework or the frame of mind of having this thing on the calendar, making sure that it gets done. So the whole purpose of this release template is just to kind of minimize those other confounding factors that come in and delay the release of your book. So the template that we've got is a Google Sheet. It's an easy way to drop in just several pieces of information that kind of lead back from some dates. We've got some effective lead time, or some effort days rather. These are just guidelines. You can obviously change all of these numbers around, but these are just some starting positions where if you put a date in, then hopefully you'll end up with something that's a bit more useful and you can check for conflict. There's areas for notes on the document. You can do a first version and print it out and then highlight it and scroll through as necessary. There's a place on there for making sure that you capture all of the details that are just relevant to the timing and the steps that are needed. Again, just so hopefully you can get this out in a meaningful way. So pretty quick exercise video here. Download a copy of it. There's a URL where you can download it both in the book and on screen at the moment. Again, you can make as many copies of this as you like. There's you don't need to show it to anyone else, but the key and the main takeaway is have a deadline, have some kind of commitment that means that you really want to hit that target date. That can be relatively arbitrary if you can't think of any strong reason to have that line in the sand. It can be an external commitment that you make to other people so that you're kind of building up towards that commitment that you've made. Or it can be a kind of an industry or calendar-based deadline, whereby if you know that a lot of your business is driven by the end of the tax year, then for sure you want this released in enough time that you can kind of start doing the marketing for the book and get it out in front of the right people prior to that date that in your particular industry calendar year is very important. So a pretty quick one. I'm going to leave you with the same options to reach out if you've got any questions. 90minutebooks.com, there's some more supporting material there, some resources, or shoot an email or give us a call into the office if you've got any questions, and we'll try and help as best as possible. So with that, thank you. I will see you in the final mindset when we're talking about beyond your book. Hey there guys, welcome to this quick explainer of the minimum viable commitment. So to a certain degree, it's obvious. I'm sure everyone that's listening will have already made the connection back to kind of like a minimum viable product. But the reason this came up was back on a podcast that I did, I think in 2013, maybe 2012 even, talking with a good friend I used to do a show with called Alok. We were talking about this idea of what's the right next step, thinking about an overall campaign as a set of moves, like kind of like a chess game, understanding that the overall game requires several moves to get from the beginning to the end. Then what's the minimum effective commitment at each stage that you can ask someone to make? So it was a great framework then, thinking about, I think we were talking about ads at the time, and it's a really great framework for thinking about the back cover copy of your book. Because as you bring a book to a close, for those who read it all, or for those who just skip to the back and see that page, then understanding that we've got the opportunity to ask something there really kind of wraps up this idea of the title is something that gets their attention, they're able to download it, but then there's a certain amount of people who just flick and don't actually read. Or, like I say, for those who read, it's moving them to the next step because, as we said before, the book's not the product. Your service is the product, or the conversation is the product. The book is just a way to facilitate it. And an NVC back cover is the way of facilitating that next step. So this is a super useful graph that I sketched out at the time. It's kind of this idea of the rapport, how much do people know, like, and trust you on one axis, and then the size of the ask or the size of the commitment on the other axis. And that red line is kind of like the threshold of willingness that anyone has to take that step. Now, obviously, how you build the rapport, how quickly you build the rapport will vary. The size of the ask is going to vary depending on where they are in the funnel or what exactly it is that you're using this MVC mindset for. And each individual person's willingness to, the threshold of willingness to take a step is going to change as well. So don't get too hung up on the science of it. This is definitely more art. And really we're just thinking about what it is, taking every campaign down to the particular move that we're in at the moment. What is that next step that moves the conversation forward? Very often we'll hear people come to Like Minute Book and think about the book as the conversion tool. They're hoping that the book will do the job of converting people for them. But what the book really is just a step in that process. It's a way of ticking many, many boxes in terms of authority and credibility, building rapport, introducing people to a new idea, setting some groundwork for how they could work with you going forward. So it definitely does all of that. But it's in the minority of cases where the book is all it takes. It's very often that next step, that next part of the conversation, that next step in the journey that you need to think about. And this mindset really focuses on that. So just to wrap up then quickly, the minimum viable commitment idea is applicable to each stage of your campaign. So the back of a call to action that we're talking about specifically here, but the emails that you follow up with people, the social media elements that you've got around promoting the book and how you're trying to engage people in the first place, onboarding people when they come on, think about that MVC idea of how you onboard people rather than kind of overwhelming them all at once. It's kind of the right information at the right time. And then referrals as well. We talk about referrals a little bit at the end of the mindsets here in Mindset 8 when we're looking beyond the book. Referrals are a great way of leveraging some of the rapport that you've got already and transferring that into the next customer. So it's kind of like the halo effect of the rapport you've built with the person that they're being referred by moves that needle a little bit further. So to wrap up, it's this idea of the smallest effective step, the minimum viable commitment that anyone can take at this stage of the process, and understand that the process has many stages. So the ad, the landing page, the back cover of the book, the emails, the onboarding, the referrals, all of these steps are going to have their own elements, but just take some time in this module to think about what is the right minimum step for this stage of the process. Okay, if you want some examples, definitely at the end of the chapter, check out, we've got an exercise that goes along with this particular mindset. So we'll look at the 90-minute book and the book blueprint scorecard as two examples of how you can specifically apply this to what you're doing. So check out those videos and we will see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome to the companion video for Mindset 1. My name's Stuart Bell and we're going to dive deeper into the thinking behind choosing your single target audience. Now, all of the companion videos are designed just to give you a little bit of background and colour to the ideas that we're presenting. If this is a mindset that you're particularly struggling with, then definitely you want to check out the exercise below this video, because that will guide you, hold your hand a little bit through an exercise just to improve your score. So we're going to run through quickly the thinking behind this idea of a single target audience. What we're really looking at doing is covering three elements. We want to think about the job of work of your book, who it is that then resonates with, and the language that they use in order that you can write using similar language with the idea of kind of meeting them in the thought, in the conversation that's already going on in their mind. Now, a lot of these phrases are going to be familiar. This is some marketing ideas that many people have promoted in the past. We're just trying to contextualize it specifically around a book, because what we found is that many people think of a book in a particular way. They think of it as a published thing that needs permission from a publisher in order to take years worth of effort to sit on a shelf or be in Amazon in the hope that someone picks it off the shelf. It builds your credibility, and at some random point in the future, your idea will marry up with their need. Now, obviously, what we're doing here is trying to shortcut that process so that the job of work of your book is mirroring and matching a requirement that they've got, so that this turns into some business, so that it moves your conversation forward closer to actually being able to engage with someone on a one-on-one level and really help them to achieve their goals, whatever it is they're looking to do. So when we think about the job of work, there's 3 or 4 options that your book really is beneficial to achieving. So the first one is new leads. This is maybe the most obvious. A lot of people think about a book in terms of lead generation, if they're thinking about this tailored purpose at all. So having the book created in a way that allows people to raise their hand, to join your list, to make invisible prospects visible for you is a very easy to understand way of thinking about your book. But even with that being said, a lot of people think that they want lead generation, but don't necessarily write in a way that promotes lead generation. So again, coming back to the first mindset, choosing the single target audience, understanding the job of work of this marketing asset is going to really inform all the rest of the process. So the second one we've got on the list is engaging existing customers. So we know that it's easier to sell more business to existing customers than it is to acquire brand new customers, because these people know, like, and trust you already. So you might want to write a book that promotes a new service or an advanced service, something that takes existing customers and opens them up to a new service or opportunity that they weren't previously aware of. The third one on the list is as a conversion tool. So whereas the first option, lead generation, is bringing people into your world, a conversion tool is more along the lines of people who are already there, but you're slowly educating and motivating people to take that next step. So rather than talking in terms of language that is very top level, top of the funnel, introducing an idea, a conversion tool might be the next step down. Whereas you think of the scorecard as a conversion tool. So rather than introducing the idea of the 90-minute book, which we do in the 90-minute book, the conversion tool of the scorecard is really guiding people towards these ideas that we've got, the framework that we've got resonates, and yes, I want to create a product like that, and we're perfectly positioned to help. So thinking of a book as a conversion tool, if that's the way that you're going, again, the content's going to be different. The fourth one then is a referral tool. Now, referrals are a great way of acquiring new business because people are being referred by the people who know, like, and trust you already. But oftentimes people think of referrals as asking people for leads, asking people for names and email addresses or phone numbers of people that they can then contact. That obviously puts your customers in an uncomfortable position because not many people want to sacrifice the details of their friends, even if they love the service that you're providing. So creating a book specifically for referrals is a great way of giving the book to someone to then give to someone else, saying, hey, we've had a great experience with these people. This idea that they've got is really going to make a difference to you. Read the book and then move the journey forward. By reading the book then has a clear call to action, which is a later mindset that you've hopefully come across already. But that call to action does the job of conversion. The referral then doesn't have to be your customer giving up the details of their friends. Now, the last two on the list are, they're not, we refer to them as passive reasons for doing it rather than active reasons for doing it. So the first four is very actively moving your book forward. Building your authority and credibility or just keeping up with other people are a little bit passive in the sense of the authority and credibility play of a book is definitely a thing, but it's not particularly active. Just because you have it, it's a kind of build it and they will come mentality. Just because you have a book doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do anything for you. If you're using your book in an active way, then the fact that the book exists definitely adds authority and credibility, but it's a secondary benefit, a passive benefit rather than an active benefit. Similarly, with the idea of keeping up, if you're just writing a book to keep up with other people, well, that's not a reason not to do it. For sure, it's I'm old enough to remember when websites were a new thing, and certainly for the first couple of years, it wasn't a requirement to have a website. And then people were having a website because they needed to keep up in their industry. And now, obviously, most people see it as an active source of traffic. But just writing to keep up, again, it's not the worst reason in the world to have it, but it's good to understand at the beginning of the process that's why you're doing it, because you can allocate the right amount of resources, both time and money. If that's the only reason you're doing it, then it's probably not worth investing the most amount of money, because you're not necessarily going to see the most amount of return from it if you don't have any other ways of using it. And again, if that's something that you struggle with, check out Mindset 8 when we talk about being beyond the book, because that is something that we look at how you can use the book in more beneficial ways. So check that out. So we've looked over the job of work. That's the first thing, understanding why you're doing this. Once we know why we're doing it, now we can think about the people, who it is that you're talking to. So if you're looking at writing a book for lead generation purposes, then we can think about who are the people that are coming across you for the first time. There's no relationship there necessarily. These aren't people who have got experience or understand what you're talking about. So understanding who they are and their current level of knowledge and understanding is going to inform what you then write about. Likewise, whether in the process or the buying cycle, if these people are likely to have already done some due diligence before they found you, that's going to inform what you write about separately to if you're really trying to write a manifesto type book that is introducing a brand new idea to a whole new audience. Understanding what their concerns and expectations are and then what the logical next step is will help you start to close your book and bring it down towards the next step, the call to action, the minimum viable commitment call to action that we talk about. So understanding once you know what the job of work is, once you know who the people are, once you've thought about what it is that they're looking to achieve at this stage, you can then think about any concerns and expectations they have in order to meet those and overcome those in the book so that they're more likely to take that next step. All of these things, once you understand who it is that you're talking to, then you can start thinking about what language it is that they're using. So now we can start talking about the language that they use. Once you understand who it is and where they are, what their concerns are, what their knowledge is, you can set your language that you use in the book to the right level. If this is a lead generation book aimed at people right at the top of the funnel who might not have an awareness of or an understanding of your process or your product or the technology around it, then you don't want to dive too deep on the technical language, because it's too early in the process. You'll leave people behind. At the end of the day, the book that you're writing is designed to move people to the next stage. It's providing them with the right level of information, enough information that you can start to build that rapport, meet them where they are at the moment, but understanding that this is a longer journey, that they're not likely to be converted immediately by your book. Instead, this is a process that they need to move from a basic level of understanding to a deeper level of understanding to really make them comfortable enough to take that step. Now, if this is a conversion tool book and your expectation is that they're further down the path, that they've already got a relatively high level of understanding, then by all means dive deeper on the language and dive into the nuts and bolts of the technology, of the system, talk about things in a more complicated way, use more insider language rather than consumer language, because again, you're trying to build a rapport with a group at a different level. So if this mindset, this idea of a single target audience is something that you're struggling with, I'd recommend going across to breakthroughdna.com, because there we've got the 8 Profit Activators book. And a lot of this language is talking about Profit Activator 2 and 3 to compelling prospects to contact you, to educate and motivate them into taking that next step. And then really once you've kind of got comfortable, or if you want to make if you need some more specific guidance on what to do, if this is still a little bit, this thinking about an audience in a very specific way is still not quite resonating, then click on the next link in the book, head over to the avatar exercise, and we can walk through there, a 50-minute focus finder exercise of really diving in deep. And again, this avatar dialed in for you and specifically understanding the job of work of your book in order to make it the most beneficial possible. So as always, if you want some extra support, then head over to 90minutebooks.com and check out the resources section. There's some additional support there. Feel free to shoot me an email and obviously try and reply to as many as possible, helping you out. Or if you want to jump on a strategy call, then give the office a call as well. And we're happy to jump on a quick strategy call and help where we can. All right, so with that, I will see you in the exercise for Mindset 1 and then in the Mindset 2 companion video. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name's Stuart Bell, and today we are going to dive into Mindset 2, picking a title that resonates. Now, Mindset 1 was all about picking that target audience, and the first element of that was the job of work, understanding what we want the book to do. So that helps inform the title, because what we want to do is get people to stop when they see the title and it triggers within them, and I want that response. So you can think of the title as the headline of an ad or the headline of an article. It's the thing that stops them in their track. It's results and outcomes focused, so that people, when they're thinking about a challenge that they've got, when they're searching for it, when they're in an environment where your message can resonate with them. So we've matched up the message that we're trying to put out there with the problem that they've got. Then the title of your book is the thing that stops people in their tracks and says, I want that. So let's dive into this exercise, this overview. The idea of the title being a headline is a much better way of thinking about your book title than perhaps a traditional book. We've been doing this now for a number of years. As I said, that the welcome video, we've helped over 800 books get created. So as you can imagine, we've seen a lot of title options and people coming with various ideas about what they want their title to be. There was a spate a couple of years ago of people wanting short, obscure, one-word titles that I can best describe as people trying to be clever. It kind of mirrored something that was happening in the traditional publishing world. So I think that's where people were getting the idea from. But the problem is that it doesn't do what it says in the tin. If someone sees that book title going past, it doesn't make people stop in their tracks and say, I want that, because they don't understand what it is. The problem, I think, comes down to people not thinking about a 90-minute book, a book for a specific purpose, in the same way as they would a traditional book. A traditional book is usually there for entertainment. People are in bookshops, they're browsing shelves, they're looking on Amazon and browsing the shelves there. They're seeing celebrity names or names that they recognize, and a clever short title that might kind of engender, I wonder what that is response, is very different from I want that. And for us, we're talking about creating a book that moves people towards an outcome that has a specific job of work. What we want is the I want that response, not necessarily the I wonder what that is, because we're not looking to entertain people. With the best will in the world, we're looking for it to be informative and move people forward and help people to take the next step, not to entertain them. If we're looking to create a traditional book, a story book, then this framework isn't necessarily the best fit, although obviously you can use elements of it to inform it. But our focus is a job of work, moving people forward. So what we want is the title to be more like the banner headline in an ad. So Google ads, Facebook ads, blog post headlines, newspaper headlines. We want it to be short and obvious. We want it to be clear. As I said before, we want it to do what it says on the tin, which is a throwback to an old commercial in the UK. But we want it to be based on that job of work that we've defined in Mindset 1 and resonate with the audience that we defined in Mindset 1. So thinking about it in that way makes much more sense. It's much easier to think about it as a headline than as something that's clever and will get people talking, because people aren't going to be talking about your book because you're not a New York Times bestseller. That's not what we're trying to do here. What you want is them to say, I want that outcome. So that response that we're trying to trigger in people is the recognition. We're trying to match the language that they've got, the problems that they're having, the thing that they're trying to resolve with the thing that you're offering. Attention is short, and depending on where you're advertising, it's quite possible that you're going to be running Facebook ads or ads in places that aren't based on intention search. So let's look at that for a second. Intentional search are things like Google, where people are searching for a specific thing. That's not necessarily the same, or not at all the same, as ads that pass by in social streams. So like Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or forums or chat areas, chat spaces, communities that you're in. What you need to do is interrupt their pattern and match with the thought that they're having, rather than answer a specific question that they're searching for. Now, obviously, depending on where you're running ads, both of them are served by the idea of a headline title as opposed to a I wonder what that is title. But you're really trying to trigger that response and match it with the language, capture the attention of people who are passing by enough for it to be a feed stopper that we sometimes refer to as. That idea of it being a feed stopper is served by using the language that we identified in mindset number 1. The other thing that we want to do is focus on benefits, not features. This is a marketing terminology or a frame of mind that you've probably heard of before, describing the outcome and what people will get from something, the kind of experiential language, as opposed to just numbers or features or a list of inside mechanisms rather than outside mechanisms is going to resonate with people more. So one obvious example these days is Apple's marketing. Many people are aware of Apple's marketing campaigns and how it's very much emotional and feelings based and experiential, as opposed to an old PC manufacturer where they're just listing the features of the graphics card or the size of the memory or the number of ports that it's got. That type of emotional engagement is what we're looking to do, because we're looking for that feed stopper response. The other way of thinking about it is solutions are better than problems. So what we're trying to do is lead people to the outcome. We're trying to remind people that there is a solution to their problem. So focusing the title on the end result, the positive, beneficial outcome, the benefits that they get rather than the features, is much better than focusing on the pain and the problems. Now, there is an element of marketing that says that fear is more of a fear of missing out, or fear of losing something is more of a driver than a potential outcome. But I don't necessarily believe that for a start. Depending on what your market is, that's definitely that definitely could be more of the case. So it's worth thinking about. But generally speaking, from a experiential and positivity and outcome and moving forward perspective, people much more likely to engage with that light at the end of the tunnel rather than a fear-based approach of you'll have a very bad outcome unless you read this. So obviously it's not one size fits all answer. There is some elements of it that's true, but as a general approach, much better to focus on that positive outcome and the success that they'll get, the end result of the thing that they're looking for, rather than the nuts and bolts of the detail of the pain that they're trying to avoid, because we're trying to help people move forward at the end of the day. The feed stopper test I've touched on already, but it really is this idea of a lot of the advertising and a lot of the places that you're going to put your book. When you think about all of the opportunities you've got to share the message, it's not necessarily in the intentional search Google space where someone's searching for an answer. It's much more likely to be in the soft reference type area of someone's Facebook feed, something, an article or something in LinkedIn, referral campaigns of passing this information to someone else. All of these things, it's not that the person, the recipient, is looking for the answer necessarily, but the language that they use when they're in an area where they are talking about their problem, or they know that they've got a problem to fix, we're really trying to interrupt that, which then also, by virtue of the fact that we're using positive language and we're describing it, it does what it says on the tin. If they are intentionally searching for something and they do find the book that we've written, then it answers that question as well. So coming to it from a interrupt perspective rather than a search perspective is the more beneficial way of doing it. Okay, so we're going to dive now into the 5 book title types that we're typically talking about. So again, over all of our experience, we've identified 5 types that really resonate with people. And it's a great way of thinking about categorizing your book into one of these 5 types. The first one is the kind of name it and claim it idea. Now, this is very much defined as a kind of a manifesto book. It's introducing the idea and it's allowing you to own the category. So some of the examples, some of the popular examples, we've picked some here that you've probably heard of before. So Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace. Financial Peace, it names it and claims it in that term, like the 4-hour work week, those terms claim that bit of the industry, claim that framework for themselves. The same with the 90-minute book. That's a terminology that didn't exist before. It's something that we've claimed and own for this particular approach that we've got. So you might have the same. You might want to have a framework, a methodology that you can build a lot of the rest of the funnel around that names it and claims it. The second one that we talk about is the just do it. So this is more instructional. It gives people an idea of the benefit of the outcome of a solution, which is just very specific. Do this. So Think and Grow Rich, Stop Your Divorce, Double Your Dating. These are all very much just do it titles because you're instructing someone in the outcome that they'll get if they read the book and take the advice that's in it. So the third is then a how-to. So this is super obvious both in terms of the definition and the words that are on the title. So these are very much solutions-focused ones. It's how to do a certain thing. So this is for the mindset of people who their problem, their challenge is a named thing, something that they would recognize. So how to win friends and influence people, how to get listings, how to be the best barefoot skier on your lake. All of those things resonate with those people who already understand that language. So the book that you're thinking of might well fit into that category if it's very specific language that you're trying to fix. This example is probably more of a narrow outcome than some of the broader. Certainly the Name It and Claim It manifesto book is pretty broad, whereas this is trying to much more narrowly fix their problem. So number 4, this is a great one if you have access to the data that allows you to do this, because it's very timely and specific. It's very neutrally charged. You're presenting data to people. It's not opinion. Obviously, you might add opinion to it, but it's very much when people are in an information gathering stage, this seems like independent information that will help them move forward. So some of the examples here, the 2021 Social Security Guide, 2021 Guide to US Hockey Scholarships, 2021 Guide to Windhaven Lakefront House Prices. All of these books are these particular ones. So these are all ones that we've worked with people on to dial in that particular access to information that they've got, presenting it in a way that the audience is going to resonate because they understand what it is, and they'll get value from it because it's seen as presenting kind of charge neutral, independent information with then a close and a call to action of a next step to take. So people, if you have got access to this information and you can package it in a certain way, then people resonate with this because it really moves their journey forward. And this is much more of this very obviously works, sits in as a slightly more on a conversion tool. If you think back to Mindset 1, we were talking about where the types of books for the job of work. This type of book can work very well as a conversion tool because you're not introducing a new idea. They're aware of it already, but you're moving them forward, presenting data to them, which is kind of self-evidently moving them towards your call to action. So the fifth is question magnets. Now, these are a great opportunity to write something if you don't necessarily have your own framework, so you're not trying to name it and claim it. If you don't have a lot of access to proprietary data, if the industry that you're working on isn't really a data-driven area, so you're not providing a guide to people, you're not correlating and bringing together a lot of information in an easy to consume way, but this is answering questions that they might have, things that are pressing on their mind in the area that you're trying to help them. So what to expect when you're expecting hugely successful book for anyone in the maternity space, that question is on everyone's mind. How much is enough? Another fantastic question that's on the mind of everyone that's thinking about retirement, whether they're approaching retirement or whether they're in the early stages of planning. That question is something that's going to be a very early question in people's minds as they're thinking about doing something, not necessarily early in the overall process, but early in thinking about doing something. What to do after dental school? Another fantastic example of something that is very specifically on people's minds. It's not data driven particularly. You're not trying to dominate a whole category, but as someone who's trying to engage with people who are coming out of dental school, this title perfectly resonates with that entire audience. So those are five title types that we talk about. And as you think about your own title, just see if it fits into one of those categories, because if you can tweak it slightly so that it better serves that audience, knowing again what the job of work is, who the people is that you're trying to engage with, and what the next step is, these are much, this gives you a great opportunity to dial it in and not run the risk of going down the traditional publishing route of trying to put a clever title up that might stop someone on a bookshelf in order for them to pick up and read the back of the book, because that's not the framework that we're working in here. So we're going to wrap up there. There are more resources that you can head over to dive into this particular mindset a little bit more. So if you want more reading on the subject, then head over to the 5booktitles formula.com, the URL at the top there, because we've got a whole book, a field guide that we wrote about these 5 book title types, which goes into a little bit more detail than we've got time to do here. And then also Dean did a book titles workshop, which is up on the resources section of the website. So head over to 90minutebooks.com and follow the workshops link, where we've got a book titles workshop where Dean goes into some of these book title types and a little bit more. And then there's a whole Q&A session that followed where he was answering questions from people on the call. So again, if this is something that you're struggling with, or you want to kind of get more, think about it a little bit more, then definitely follow along with those 2 resources, and there's lots of opportunity then to dial in your idea within the framework of the 5 titles. As always, if you want to ask us some questions, then head over to 90minutebooks.com. We've got some additional resources there. There's our contact details on there as well. You can drop me an email. Always happy to answer questions as much as I can. And if you want to jump on a strategy call, again, happy to do that as much as time allows. So give a call to the office or drop me an email and we can schedule a time. Okay, so with that, I will see you in Mindset. Hey everyone, welcome to the exercise for Mindset number 1, the dialing in your single target audience. So we're going to run through a quick 15-minute focus finder exercise. The aim, as we said in the explainer video, is to really dial in the job of work of your book, who it is that you're talking to and the language that they're using. And by doing this first, the reason this is mindset 1 is that it informs all of the later activities that we do, giving you some scope and balance and something to validate back against to make sure your book is as effective as possible. So if you've got any questions about your single target audience, well worth going through this exercise just to help get that dialed in once and for all. And we'll also touch on, as we go through the steps, we'll also touch on what you can do with other avatar-based ideas, other ideas that fall outside this first single target market, because of course, once you've got the first one dialed in and up and running, then it makes sense to look at other ones further down the track, but one target market at a time. So let's look at specifically at what we're going to achieve here. We want to dial in the goals of what we're looking to achieve with the book. We're looking to find out the knowledge that the people have got, to see their position, where they are in their understanding already. We want to look at any misconceptions or barriers that they might have to get started. We really want to dial in that exact example. And if you can think of one customer particularly, one customer who's your ideal target, and then think about where they were, that's often a great way to start. So once we've kind of looked at the person in a little bit more detail, then we can bring in some other elements. So we can look at demographic information, kind of what's the typical gender and age, the income threshold of the people that you're looking to target, their location, what their family situation is. And one important thing to remember about all of this is none of this impacts your product itself or your service. Your product and service is still what it is. This is talking about this particular marketing channel. So the whole job of the single target audience isn't to change fundamentally what you do. It's just you've only got so much time and effort and budget to deal with this particular audience, this particular campaign. So the single target audience is looking to maximize and make that as specific as possible. It's kind of like fishing with a line rather than with a net. We're going after those individual markets rather than just scattering and going wide in the hope that we'll scoop up some of the relevant people. So once we've dialed in who they are, what they're talking about, the job of work that we want, what we want them to do next, we'd identify all of these elements into our first pass of the audience. Then we want to go through and refine it. So we'll talk about the steps of how to position this exercise in a moment, but I just want to talk about some constraints. So some of the things you want to do once you've gone through this exercise is pencil in, diarise sometime 2 days later to review the audience, and review it with a relatively narrow frame of mind, because what you're looking at doing is dialing in the single target audience, not adding to as broad an audience as possible. So we're trying to be specific. So come back and refine 2 days later. At that stage, add any more clarifying details that are necessary, but make sure that you're adding clarifying details, not additional details. So once you've got that target market in mind, you want to build on that and not go broader. There is a tendency of people getting a scarcity mindset and not wanting to rule out people. So they'll add and add and add and make it wider and wider and wider. Again, we're not talking about limiting who you're ever going to talk to, or you're not going to turn away people from another group that come to you, but we're just talking about maximizing the efficiency of this active approach to getting your book out there and engaging with the first target audience. So we want to build that specific channel as comprehensively as possible, not turn away other people, but not get sidetracked with broader things, because it just makes it either too expensive or takes too long or it becomes too difficult. So with those other things, when you're refining it, if you have identified some other areas that are hot and valuable areas that you do want to address, then just jot them down as a second avatar group, because this is always something that you can come back to later in another avatar exercise, another single audience exercise. So you don't want to throw that work away, but definitely have the discipline of writing it in a second list or putting it in a second bucket to come to later. And then one of the great things, I'm constantly surprised by how few people think or remember to do this, is if you're struggling with a particular framework or way of thinking about something, or how do I do this, there are very few things in the world now that someone else hasn't done already. So Google is your friend in this example. So just Googling for what is an avatar criteria, if you need some more specifics than the previous slide, or Googling avatars for XYZ industry, and almost certainly you'll come up with examples that people have come up with already. Now, the idea there is to make sure that, again, you're not going wide and taking on other broader people's ideas, but building on and adding depth to the channel that you've got, the single target audience that you've got. And the other discipline is not to over-iterate and get stuck in a kind of analysis paralysis mindset. So only do one set of refining. Do the 50-minute focus finder exercise first, put it down to one side, come back 2 days later, do one refining exercise, and then move forward with that group. If you're in even remotely the right ballpark, then you've already done more than the majority of people will do just in this particular exercise to get your target audience dialed in, to make the outcome of your book more likely to kind of gel with what those people are thinking. So there's definitely no reason to overdo this and refine at the expense of moving on and get into the actual work of creating the rest of it. So let's look at the 50-minute focus finder exercise in detail. You want to set a timer for 50 minutes. You want to be in a different location than you're usually in, just so you can kind of mentally separate out the work into a different task. You want to be in an area with no distractions. You don't want people coming in and asking you questions, or the phone ringing partway through, or needing to leave 20 minutes in to go pick up the kids. So make sure you've got that 50 minutes, ideally in a different location, just so you get that kind of mental separation to do the task, and definitely with no distractions. So the first 15 minutes, you want to do a free writing exercise. So free writing, again, if you haven't come across it before, you can Google it to see the definition. But free writing is just grab the pen or pencil and have that discipline of keep writing as much as possible for those 15 minutes. It's only 15 minutes, so everyone can suffer through it for 15 minutes. If it's the case that for the first 5, you just sat there with the pencil and you're not doing anything, then that's fine. But just keep the pencil in hand for 15 minutes and just write. There's no filtering, there's no judgment, no one else is looking at these notes. Just write anything to do with the question in hand, which is, who is the audience that I'm looking to engage with this book? You might start off on target and then wander off on a tangent. You might start off really being very broad and then dial it in. But the job of the first 15 minutes is just to keep writing without any filtering, without any judgment, because what you want to do is get as many ideas on possible, because then in the next 10 minutes, this is where we filter and group and sift and sort. For me, I always prefer doing this on paper rather than on a screen, because I can write quicker than I can type usually, and I can write increasingly smaller and smaller and smaller as I'm grouping, as the thought progresses and I'm trying to fit the thoughts into that, the constraints of that one piece of paper. So where you write on the paper, which is freer than where you write on screen, where you write does some of this grouping for you as you're writing. But again, the discipline is write first, filter and group second. So make it as messy as possible. Again, no one's going to see this. Draw arrows to link them together, group them together, star them for the better ideas, cross out the bad ideas, because in the next 15 minutes, we're looking at developing that persona. So what you should have by this point is all of the ideas that you thought about in the first 15 minutes, kind of sifted and sorted and grouped and highlighted into the ones that you really want to move forward with. And then that last 15 minutes, add as much depth and detail to that particular avatar as possible. So again, we talked about not going wide, not increasing the breadth of what you're talking about, but instead increasing the depth. So that group of customers, that avatar, that ideal customer that you're thinking about in your mind's eye, what are all of the elements? Let me just break the screen and jump back. But what are all of these elements of that group that fit and build the depth to that character? So you might have started with, what is it they're looking to achieve? That might be an obvious thing. Someone's looking to fix this problem or to make progress in this certain area. But now you might be adding to the misconceptions, because that's something that oftentimes in the first 15 minutes you don't really think about. So you might now have the opportunity to dive in and think more about what the misconceptions are. That might lead to what knowledge they've got. Okay, well, with this misconception, it probably means that they're getting their information from this source, or they're only aware of this element, or there's certain things in the technology or the process behind it that they might not be aware of. So all of these elements can dive deeper and really build the depth of the avatar, not the breadth of the avatar. And then the last 5 minutes there is just looking to wrap all of this up and, if possible, build it into a statement, a description of who that avatar is. So now you've gone through all of the steps. What you want to end up with is a paragraph that just describes what the person is looking to achieve, what their current understanding is and the problems or the questions that they might currently have, what are the common misconceptions that they might be struggling with, and what is the ideal next step for them to take, the one thing that will move them further forward in the journey, whether it's learning more about a certain element, whether it's taking an actual step, or whether it's jumping right in. Remember the example of the lead generation versus the conversion goal. Again, the next step is going to be different. So at the end of this process, the end of the 50 minutes, you should have a very clear idea of who the avatar is, of who the person is that you're trying to engage with the book. And this avatar is then going to inform all of the other decisions that we make further down the step. Remember, keep it time constrained. Don't get distracted. Keep writing in the first 15 minutes. Just kind of break through any mental kind of hang up that you might have around writing it, and then put it to the side for a day or two, and then come back and do one iteration of refinement in order to dial in that paragraph, that closing statement, so that you've got a clear understanding of who it is that you're writing for. Okay, so as always, if you're looking for some additional support, then you can reach out to us. Head over to 90minutebooks.com and the resources tab, and there's some additional information there. Feel free to shoot me an email at Stuart@90minutebooks, or call into the office, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. If you want to do a strategy call with us, we're always happy to do that as much as we can as well. So feel free to reach out. Super excited to see you get this idea, this goal person, this persona dialed in, your single target audience, because that does inform and help you move forward with all of the other mindsets. So with that, I'll see you in mindset 2. Hi everyone, welcome to the exercise for mindset number 3. Today we're going to look at a word palette to help us pick the selection of words or phrases that we can use for our amplifying subheading. So the most important element that we're looking at in this mindset is really to get it dialed in to amplify exactly and match the audience that we've selected and the job of work that we want as an outcome. So building on that work, having the confidence that that work is correct, what we want to do here is use the perspective of that audience group, of that avatar that we created, use their perspective, their language, their understanding, the words that we know they use and the questions that we know they're asking, to create a set of phrases, words, the tonality, the passion or the emphasis behind it, all of those words that they could use, we want to capture now, so that as we're coming to write our amplifying subheading, we can check back against those and just make sure that we're hitting the right mark, maybe on specific words or languages, a specific turn of phrase that we want to make sure that we include and not forget or overlook. Or if it's more subtle than that, it's just that we're in the right direction, we're kind of positioning it at the right level. If it's a very impassioned audience or a very engaged audience, then we want to use language that reflects it. If it's a very analytical audience or numbers driven, or the place that they are in the funnel is at a slightly more analytical level rather than a passionately engaged level, then we just want to take this opportunity to make sure that mindset 3 is a 12 rather than a 1. So the purpose of the amplifying subheading is to amplify the title that we've picked and really reinforce the outcome. So what we want to do now is spend 50 minutes in a focus finder just going through some of the elements to really narrow down, and at the end up with something that we can either write our amplifying subheading from or validate our amplifying subheading against to make sure it's hitting the mark. So if you followed through with the earlier 50-minute focus finder exercise, this is going to be very similar. We're going to break it down into 4 stages, and each of those 4 stages we're going to get through a certain amount of work. We only want to do this exercise once, so we want to kind of commit to ourselves and give us the 50 minutes to actually get through it. But we also don't want to check and go back and circle back too many times. We can have the confidence that once through is enough, as long as we're giving it our full attention. So to achieve that, as always, my suggestion is go to a different location so that you can kind of psychologically switch into the framework of doing this work and not other work. We want to make sure that we've got the time to do it, that we're not needing to go pick up the kids 45 minutes into it, and that we've got no distractions. So hopefully it's someone somewhere or some time away from other people so that you can get to the end of this and not be concerned that someone's going to interrupt the flow. Okay, so with that, we're going to take the first 15 minutes to do a free writing exercise again. Now, the reason that I always circle back to this at the beginning of the 50-minute session is that this 15 minutes of free writing builds into the fact that for most people, it's like meditation. For most people, it's difficult to get into the right frame of mind. It's difficult to kind of move past the preconceptions or the thoughts that we've got already about this particular exercise in order to get to some of the stuff that maybe isn't at the first level of consciousness. Now, I'm the furthest from someone who does a lot of meditating or is even in tune with that kind of spiritual side, but there is definitely an element of the free writing exercise that means once you keep your hand moving, your brain does switch into the mode of writing the next level of thoughts, not just the first level of consciousness thoughts. So again, first 15 minutes, we're going to write down the title first as the kind of starting point, and then write down all the associated ideas and words that go along with that. Again, no one's going to see this. There's no right or wrong answers. Don't take this time to filter or sift and sort at all. We just want to get down as many of the things as possible that our brain, both the kind of conscious and subconscious, is associating with this phrase, the start phrase, which in this case is the title. So 15 minutes doing that. The next step we want to do is just 5 minutes to filter and review them. So a slightly shorter time to filter and review in this exercise than the last, because in theory it should be slightly easier. If you've done the first exercise, then you're going to be slightly in tune with this filtering and sifting and sorting stage. If even if you haven't done it, if not, then it's still a pretty quick exercise because we don't need to be as specific. When we're doing the focus finder exercise to choose the audience, there's a slightly higher stakes outcome. When we're doing the focus finder exercise to pick the word palette, the fact that we're also then writing the subheading means that we're going to do another stage of work in this effectively. So again, a slightly shorter time, just filtering and review. So as with the last one, we're going to do the same. We're going to cross out the low value ideas. We're going to circle and draw lines to connect the words that are associated into groups. And what we want to end up with is circling the 2 or 3 best ideas. Those ideas, those words or phrases that really resonate and amplify the title that we've got. We're going to take 15 minutes now to build on those selections and go a little bit deeper into all of the power words and the synonyms that are related to the best ideas that we've picked. So we've got 15 minutes. I'd suggest the first 5 minutes is just go through and give it a best draft as you can yourself. The next 15 minutes is something that we don't usually recommend in a focus finder. It's going to be going to the internet to do a little bit more work in. Now, the only reason that I suggest it here is because it is very valuable, but I want to suggest it with the caveat of only allow yourself to do this for these 10 minutes. And within the isolation of this bit of the focus finder, don't go off on a rabbit hole investigating something else. Don't allow yourself to be sidetracked. Definitely don't check email. But what we want to do is do things like go into a online thesaurus to look for other synonyms that you haven't thought about. Go to Google Complete and type in, so Google Complete, if you're not familiar with it, is this idea of as you start typing into the Google search bar, there are also complete suggestions or the other suggestions that come up, gives you ideas and words that other people have suggested. There are a whole number of word association tools out there, but I'd say unless you're familiar with that already, unless it's something that you use day to day, I wouldn't get sidetracked because you don't have time. I wouldn't get sidetracked in those particular words. But if you find yourself doing this exercise a lot, this idea of starting with a seed word and then looking for all the associated things, then some of the word tracker type tools, a lot of them are associated with SEO and keyword research. So if you do find yourself doing it a lot, then looking at those tools and becoming familiar with it might be a good use of some of this 15-minute development time. The other suggestion that I've got is there's a book called Words That Sell. I can't remember off the top of my head who the author is. Anyway, it's called Words That Sell. And the whole purpose of it is it starts with a few keyword phrases and it's got a load of ad copy related words that have associations with strong marketing or sales copy. So it's a great resource if you're going to do, as you're thinking about the beyond the book and you want to get more into a marketing mindset, it's well worth the $20 or so that the book costs just to have it sat on the shelf. Because the other thing it does is it identifies power words or paraphrases. So it's a good tool for reminding yourself what this third-party resource, what this book suggests is the power words for certain things, and then you can always pick and choose the ones you want from that resource. So again, slightly off topic from just the 50 minutes of dedicated time, but if you've got that resource, then now is a good time to use it. And then the last 10 minutes, like we had last time, is to refine the selections that you've got so far into either the actual subheading, if you're that far ahead and want to write it, or if you haven't got to that bit of the module yet, you're doing the exercise first, then just write down a couple of subheadings that are kind of in the right ballpark, that amplify the title, and come back and when you're in the actual subheading writing stage of the process, then come back and validate against these word palette exercises, these word palette options that you've kind of narrowed down in this exercise. So remember, check back against the test that we had in the companion video, the module, the Mindset 3 companion video, just to check that your amplifying subheading is in the right direction. Broadly speaking, you're not introducing other subjects, you're not trying to convince people, and you're not self-promoting in the subheading. Check that it's really about amplifying the title that you've picked. It's really about building the message, compelling people to take the next step, and that leads us into what we want them to do finally, which is a minimum viable commitment call to action on the back of the book, or at the back of the book, which we'll look at in Mindset 4. So I'll see you there. Hi everyone, welcome back. My name's Stuart Bell. We're going to dive into Mindset number 3 companion video, looking at your amplifying subheading. So what we're doing here is building obviously on the mindsets as we go through. The last one we looked at your title and how it should be a feed stopper. It should do exactly what it says on the tin. So with the subheading, what we're looking at doing is building on that work. We're looking at amplifying the message that the title conveys. We're looking at being compelling rather than convincing. We're not looking at adding any additional information in the subheading. We're just looking at building on it. Now, one of the things that comes up quite a lot here is this idea of scarcity, because people want to use the subheading as a way of throwing in additional words that might pique the interest of someone as this message is passing by in their feed or as they see the cover of the book. But if we think back to mindset number 1 and picking that single target market, we know that for this particular campaign, for this particular job of work, we're doing one particular thing. We're aiming at one particular group of people. We've done the work to establish that that group of people are the customers that we want to be dealing with. They are the people that we can help the most. That audience group is big enough that if we dominated that market, that would be a substantial business. So really we're looking at doubling down and making it as dialed in as possible to that particular group of people, not adding in other things on the off chance that we might resonate with someone that the title missed, the title didn't get. If you find yourself doing that, and there's a test towards the end of the this mindset that allows us to kind of verify the subheading, but if we find ourselves doing that, then we need to go back and revisit the title, or go back and revisit the group of people, the job of work that we're trying to do. So the way of thinking about the subheading is as the description text in an ad. So everyone's familiar with AdWords ads. There's the headline and the body. The body is then the words that compel people to take the action. So thinking of it that way around, again, rather than thinking about it in a traditional publishing sense, where the subheading can be off on any number of different angles, what we're looking at doing here is being specific to that target group. So we're looking for it to be a short sentence, a short descriptive sentence that is consistent with the title and reinforces the message that the people are in the right place, that their brain or their eyes did right by stopping and pausing for a second. This is going to fix a problem, and they should take the next step of downloading or requesting it. This idea of being amplifying, of kind of building on the subject, it is key, because when we look at the job of work, what we're trying to achieve is we're really trying to move people along from they don't know who we are to something has identified us as a potential fix for a problem they've got, to this is the action that they want to take, through to they want to take the next step and raise their hand and get in touch and start or take the conversation further. So when we're thinking about amplifying, we're thinking about choosing the words, we're thinking about building on the message and kind of keeping everything within the rails of the job of work that we're trying to do. So the exercise that goes along with mindset 3 is called a word palette exercise. And that again is just another 50-minute focus finder that allows us to take a little bit of time and really dial in the language, the kind of suite of words to pick from that will resonate with this message that we're trying to convey. So it's key in the subheading not to kind of introduce any new ideas, because as I said, we're not trying to use it as a space to plug the gaps of a weak title. We're looking at amplifying the title that we've actively chosen, and not just keyword stuffing, if you're familiar with that term, adding in additional words just for the sake of hoping that it will resonate with more people on the off chance they see these other sentences. It's really being confident in the job of work that we're trying to do, confident in the title that you've selected, that it resonates with those people, and the subheading now is a chance to amplify that message with additional words that build on the sentence, the heading that's in the title, and doing it in a way that's compelling them to take the next step rather than convincing. So if we look at that language slightly more, this idea of compelling versus convincing, this is one of those things that it may be difficult to describe, but you know it when you see it. So very often you get that feeling of kind of whiskers rather than cheese, the more cheese, less whiskers analogy that we often use in our world. It's kind of the mouse will do whatever it can to get the cheese, but as soon as it senses whiskers, it will run first and kind of ask questions later. So it's the same with prospects. We want to kind of compel and lead these people towards the next step, not kind of put anything kind of salesy or have a commercial intent too soon before they're ready to build that rapport and give us that next step. So we don't want to put those whiskers in too soon, because it will kind of push people away. So this idea of being compelling, of obviously leading people to the next step, of reinforcing that they're in the right place, of building on the narrative of the headline, the words that are there to emphasize to people that yes, this next step, or yes, the content of the book is going to answer the question that's on their mind. All of this builds on the earlier mindsets and moving people towards that action that we want them to take after they've opted in and downloaded. So when we think about the amplification test, I mentioned a few minutes ago that there's the way of kind of seeing if you're adding things. Here's kind of 4 things to validate the words that you're adding to the subheading. So the first one is remember the job of work. So we know what we want to do. We know where we want to move people. We know that having picked the group of people that we're trying to talk to, understand what their position is, what their language is, all of the words in the subtitle are building on those, not introducing any additional things. The second error, for want of a better term, that we see people fall into is using the subheading as a place for self-promotion, written by the world's greatest such and such, or 10 years of experience doing such and such. All of these social proof elements are valuable and can certainly be brought up somewhere else, but the subheading isn't the place to do it. The subheading is that amplifying words for the title. So if you find yourself promoting too much, or promoting at all really, in the, maybe it's not even at all, but kind of obviously promoting in the subheading, then that's not the place for it to be. If you can subtly reinforce that this is the right place because of what they're about to discover, that is okay, but not just the blatant self-promotion. The other element to check against is this idea of the same audience. So we talked briefly about adding new words and going broad and then keyword stuffing. A key way to kind of verify that or validate that is think, do these extra words attract the same audience as the title? So with it written down on a piece of paper, cover up the subheading, think about what title what audience the title compels, cover up the title, think about what audience the subheading compels. As long as that's on the same page, as long as they're talking to the same group of people, then we're amplifying that title message. And then the last one, and this one's a little bit takes a little bit of work to get through sometimes, is think about, are you using power words? So what we want to think about in the title is continue that positivity message, that idea that we spoke about in Mindset 2 of thinking about the outcomes and the results and the beneficial position that people will be in the end, and this kind of positive power word position rather than weak or negative or unempowering words that could be in the subheading. So those 4 tests are a great way just to check that you're on the right page when it comes to a subheading that really amplifies the message of the title. So as I mentioned, if you want to work on this in a little bit more detail, then check out the Mindset 3 exercise, which is a word palette exercise, because that will, around a 50-minute focus finder frame, just allow you to kind of get this palette of words that really resonate with the audience, and then you can pick from those in the subheading that you select. Again, all with the intention of amplifying the message and really getting that one audience absolutely compelled to take that next step, because all of the words resonate with the problem that they've got, the problem that we're trying to solve. So, as always, if you've got any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. Check out the 90 Minute Books website for the resources section. We've got some more material there. If you want to reach out to me directly, answer as many questions as I can, so Stuart at 90 Minute Books, or give us a call at the office. Again, if you want to schedule a strategy call, always happy to do that with new authors. And we're excited to see you bring this section to a close, this kind of putting in place the thing that you're going to create. So that's the single target audience, the single target audience, the heading the title that resonates with them, and the amplifying subheading. In the next mindset, we're going to move on to more of the outcome that we want. We'll start thinking about how we can guide people towards taking the next step. And mindset 4 talks about the minimum viable commitment. So I'll see you there. Hey there guys, welcome to the exercise video for module 4. We're going to dive into a couple of examples of the minimum viable commitment back cover. Really the aim is to get yours dialed in within this framework of helping people move forward in the conversation towards eventually working with you. So we're going to look at a couple of examples. The thing that we're really trying to do, as we described in the companion video for this mindset, is look at addressing something for all 3 groups of people to do. Those where they're not ready yet, those where they're interested but they need some compelling, some motivating to take the next step, and those that are ready to go now, because obviously we don't want to forget about them. Technically, I guess there's a 4th group of those people who aren't interested at all, but we're not writing for those. So it's just these 3 groups of people that we're looking to engage with and give them the opportunity to move forward. So the 2 examples we're going to look at is the scorecard book, obviously the book that you're looking at now, and then compare that with the 90-minute book. The reason I've included both in these next 2 slides is because the 2 books have 2 different jobs of work. So if you remember back to the earlier mindsets, we were saying that the job of work may be to engage at the very top level, the kind of lead generation book for new people who don't yet know, like, or trust you. And then another option was a conversion tool for people who are already on the list and are a little bit further down the track. So that's the difference between the 90-minute book, which is more of the manifesto, the top of the funnel book, versus the scorecard book, which is a little bit further down. The assumption is that all of the scorecard readers have already read the 90-minute book, are aware of what we do, and this is just further down that conversion cycle towards taking a step. So the action steps that are on this particular book are more, there's a higher expectation, that threshold of willingness, if you remember from the earlier slide, that expectation is that people reading this, you guys watching the video now, there's more rapport, there's more understanding built up. So therefore the ask is a little bit higher because you're already further down that funnel. You're already closer to wanting the outcome. So we can ask for a bigger commitment than we do on the 90-minute book. So you can see here the 3 steps that we've got to engage those 3 groups of people: the ones who are not yet ready to do something with us, who are ready, and who want us to execute for them. Because remember, this book, although we're looking to provide as much value as we can for people who want to do it themselves, really the ultimate destination is that we can do it for you quicker and easier than you can do it yourself. So we are conscious of trying to move people in that direction. So the 3 steps here are the Blueprint DIY program, the jumping on a scorecard review call if you want to talk about it more, which is an opportunity for us to share a little bit more detail with you, and then the get started. That's kind of the top level of commitment for those people who have understood that the easiest way is for us to do it, and therefore this is the way to get started. If we compare that to the 90-minute book, the manifesto book, the one at the top of the funnel for colder traffic, then there the 3 steps are, for those who are interested but not yet ready, it's head to the website and check out the book titles workshop, because our understanding of this funnel that we've orchestrated is that the title is one of the key things that gets people motivated, that once they've got a title dialed in and they can understand the audience that it resonates with, that's the first barrier to moving forward and getting something created. So the first step, head over to the website to check out the free no opt-in required titles workshop. The second one is then actually pointing people to the scorecard. Now this may be the funnel, this may be the experience that you had yourselves, opted in from an ad or from a source where you didn't necessarily know who we were or what we did, through to the scorecard to kind of evidence and understand more about your own idea to take that further forward. And hopefully at some point we'll be working together to actually get your book executed, which is then the 3rd step. The 3rd step, if you're ready to get started, then here's a link to go now. The 2 other elements that we also include in all of the back covers, one is kind of a restatement of the problem, because remember this mindset of if people just get the copy of the book and they're flicking through it, they don't actually want to read it because they don't have time, but the title resonates with them, they flick through the table of contents, which is the next mindset that we're looking at, to see that they're heading in the right direction, and then over to the back, and there's an execution step, a step that they can take now in order to get the outcome that they want. Then we really want to present to people that easy, minimal commitment way, no matter where they are, to keep moving forward, to take an action, make a commitment towards the outcome that they're looking for. So we restate the problem briefly on the back cover because there's room to do it and it makes sense. And then at the bottom, we always include contact details. Now, sometimes people are reluctant to do that because they're concerned that they'll get overwhelmed with people just contacting them. You'll notice I put my email address and the phone number on the end of all of these videos. Realistically, the problem, if you think you're going to have a problem of being overwhelmed, then A, well, that's a good problem to have, and B, the reality is that's not going to happen. Even in Dean's world, whose reach is substantially bigger than most of us looking today, we put Dean's contact details on stuff all the time, and again the office phone number, but it is very few people that uninvitedly or out of the blue just reach out. And for those ones that do, then we've got a way of responding and engaging as best we can. It's not overwhelming numbers, and what it does allow is for all of the people who are building a rapport and moving towards working with us, it just brings people into the fold, into the family, and allows that conversation to move forward. So if possible, I would definitely include the email address and contact numbers. Now, obviously, they don't have to be your home phone number and the email that you're in all of the time. It can be another set of details, but certainly present that opportunity to people to connect with you directly. So let's dive in quickly to those 3 next steps. So the first group of people, those people who aren't ready yet, think about what information you've got that is useful to people at this stage. So however you've positioned your book, what is the other information, and ideally the other information that moves people forward. So not going broad or wide, not extending the breadth of information, but instead extending the depth. What is it that you've had that already exists that's relevant to the book that you can allow people to head to consume more information? So if we go back to the 90-minute book example, people have seen the 90-minute book as a title. The content is kind of introducing a new way of thinking. We've identified the fact that the title is a key part to the puzzle, and then we've given people the option to go to a free, no opt-in titles workshop. So what do you have, and ideally what do you have already that can expand the depth of people's understanding in this particular campaign? The reason I say what existing content do you have is because we'll try to, as easily as possible, make this book into a reality without creating a whole load of additional work for you. So if you're in a position where you're having to create new stuff to back up the extra steps, realistically, it's less likely that you're going to get around to it. We're trying to move forward on this and get it out the door. So what already exists that you can point people towards. If you've got absolutely nothing at all, then the easiest next step is to quickly record a companion video to the book that you're creating. So for anyone who resonates with the title enough to request it, and then enough to take a next step, even if they're not yet ready to get started, the idea of a companion audio or video, an explainer to jump on camera and grab a copy of the book and introduce people to the subject, thank them for downloading it. What I find often is after people have read it, there's this section in chapter whatever that people are still struggle with. So what we mean by this is, and then go deeper into the explainer for that particular piece. Because what you're looking to do is bring people into the fold quicker, make them feel like they're a valued part of the family, make that connection with people so that you're sharing your great information with them. Remember, we're looking to build that threshold of willingness in order to take the next step. So a very easy way to do that is, based on the book that you've already created, create something that is more of an explanation or expands on the book, rather than creating something completely brand new. Remember that you're looking at this as a minimum viable commitment or minimum viable back cover. So you're trying to get it out the door as quick as possible. You can always add to it afterwards. If you use URL shorteners or redirect URLs for the links that you put in there, you can always change what that asset is and build on it later. So if in step one you point people to the accompanying video I recorded some audio to accompany the book itself, you can always add to that afterwards. Point them to a landing page that initially has the audio, but over time could have some additional printed resources on there, or a better audio, or change it to a video instead. So again, get it out the door to begin with and then add to it later. So if we think about the second group, then those who are interested but need some more motivation to take a step. Again, thinking about the 90-minute book, step 2 is for people to do the scorecard. So what do you have already, again, what you have already that allows people to evidence to themselves that they're in the right place? So it's not necessarily more information just for information's sake, but how can they evidence to themselves that this is the right journey that they're on? So a great example is the 90-minute book and the book blueprint scorecard. But another great example is Jim Hacking, immigration lawyer that we've worked closely with for many years now. He has an assessment, he has a book talking about immigrants coming in under a fiancé visa, and then, which is having gone through the process myself, it's a complicated process. But then as a step 2 option, a scorecard, a mindset scorecard, isn't really the right thing for that market. It's not so much how do you feel, or your confidence about the immigration process, but what they have is a checklist of all of the papers and the documents that you're likely to need for your case. Now that works very well for them because A, it's a valuable piece of information that people can opt in for. It's logically moving people down the process from the kind of discovery phase through to a starting to execute phase, and to a certain degree it evidences to people that, hey, this is a lot of work, it's perhaps more than I expected, and I really need the help of an immigration lawyer rather than doing it myself. So you see that second step, it's evidencing to people that they're in the right place, but it's also kind of demonstrating that perhaps there's more to it than this. It's a progression down towards the outcome from the discovery phase at the top to the execution at the end. Step 2, if possible, a checklist, a white paper, a scorecard, mindsets and assessment. All of these things are actual tangible steps that people can take that are moving them towards that journey. The other benefit of step 2, making it an opt-in, although people have opted in for the book in the first place already, step 2 being valuable enough that it kind of makes sense that people would be willing to put their name and email address in, that's not too much of a deterrent. But what it also does is for anyone that gets a copy of the book without having opted in, so let's take the Amazon example. If someone requests a copy of the book for Amazon, you don't know who those people are. Step 2 being opting in for the assessment or the white paper or the scorecard allows you to capture those people's details in a way that makes sense. It doesn't seem like you're asking for their details for too small a thing, or a side benefit or a breadth type asset. This is definitely moving people down the same funnel towards the outcome in a way that matches that minimum viable commitment threshold of willingness for them to enter their details in order to take that next step. So the third and last group, and hopefully there's lots of these people as well, this is the people who are ready to get started now. So what we want to do is present them with a kind of a minimum viable commitment way of actually taking that step to get started. So it's streamlining that process to come in through the door and make that first commitment towards actually doing business with you. If possible, if you can name it as a process. So if you're watching this and you're familiar with the I Love Marketing world, back in the early days, you probably heard Joe talking about the kind of room by room, carpet cleaning audit that Joe would do for the carpet cleaning business, or Dean's room by room review for pricing a home, giving a valuation on a home. Both of those things are named processes for things that all carpet cleaners and all real estate agents would do anyway. Everyone's going to come in and look at the carpet and decide how much work it is to do. Everyone's going to give a price opinion on a property. But by naming it as a certain thing and keeping it as an easy step to get started, then that really streamlines that process on the journey for people to raise their hand and take that first step. One of the things to remember is that there's many studies that 85% of people, they're going to convert over the long term rather than the short term. So again, this goes back to a certain degree to how long your buying cycle is, which we looked at in Mindset 1, and understanding that journey. But understand that the success of the book itself isn't necessarily completely related to how many people take that getting started action, because people are ready to get started when they're ready, not when you're ready. So understanding that collecting all of these leads, it's the 15% rather than the 85% of people who are ready to go today, but having a way of staying in touch and building that rapport with the 85%, that's really where the win of the project, the win of the campaign comes overall. So there we go. Hopefully that as an example made sense. Jump back in the video to those 2 screenshots of both the 90-minute book and the scorecard for the exact examples, or hopefully you've got copies of the book as well, and think about what are the easy things that exist already as much as possible. The easy way for those 3 groups of people to get started and move forward in their conversation. So, as always, if you've got any questions, you want to looking for some more resources, then head over to 90minutebooks.com because we've got additional resources there. If you want to give us a call or drop us an email, we'll happily answer any questions that we can. And if you want to jump on a strategy call, again, happy to do that as well. So with that, you maybe hear that my voice is starting to get croaky, trying to get all of these videos done at once. So I will join you in the second half of the mindsets, where hopefully the voice holds out long enough to get through module 5, mindset 5. Okay, I'll see you there. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name's Stuart Bell, and today we're looking at mindset 4, which is your minimum viable commitment call to action. So these are the words that are on your back cover. It's the step that you want people to take after they've opted in and received a copy of the book. And honestly, it's the step you want them to take regardless of whether they read the content or not. Because the reality is that unfortunately read rates are low for books across the board. Even books that people pay for because they want to be entertained, they rarely read them or rarely read all the way through. But what we know is that people have expressed a preference for this. They've opted into it because your title was compelling. We've written a title that is very outcomes based, so we know that they want the outcome that you're promising, and the back cover gives them a way to shortcut the success. It gives them a way to jump straight to the thing they can do to move that journey forward towards that solution. So when we're thinking about back cover copy, we're thinking about things in a very different way from traditional books. So we're going to look at what is the MVC, what is the minimum viable commitment. We're going to look at the importance of starting a conversation and how the back cover can help do that. We're going to look at this slight difference between capturing and engaging and why it's important to do both if we can. And then we're just going to quickly check in with a problem that I see often. People think about books in the traditional publishing sense. So traditional books are written to, traditional back covers are written to sell the book. So we're going to quickly look at ways to avoid that thinking. So the minimum viable commitment, if you're at this part of the book, then you've maybe already checked out the MVC video a couple of pages ago. If you want a bit of a deeper explainer on what the minimum viable commitment is, then check out that video. But I'm going to assume that it's relatively self-explanatory. We've got two axes: the rapport, the amount that someone knows, likes and trusts you, and the ask, what you need them to do, or what you want them to do rather. And then the line is this threshold of willingness of anyone to take that step based on how much they know, like and trust you. So if this book is very top of the funnel, if your primary job of work is engaging brand new leads, then the rapport that you've managed to build up is going to be far lower than if, for example, it was a referral book. A referral book is usually being given to people by existing customers, so they've got a very strong relationship, so you can piggyback some of that rapport because it's coming from a trusted source. So you can imagine already that the amount that we can ask them to do, the minimum viable step we can request, is going to change based on what the job of work is. So what we're looking at doing is taking some time now in this mindset just to match what we're asking based on what we know their journey to be, based and informed by the amount of rapport, how much they know, like and trust us, so they're the willingness to take that next step. So starting a conversation, the book is not the product. That's one of the biggest things to remember in all of this process. The book itself, you're not going to make money from the book itself. Your job isn't to sell pages, it's not a story. What you're selling is the opportunity to do something more, to get an outcome, to hopefully work with you and help you provide the outcome for them. So this idea of what the next steps should be, what the back cover should contain, is very different from a traditional publishing sense. Understanding what your job of work is, and the job of work that we thought about and defined in the earlier mindsets, is really going to help inform this, because you know now in which context you're more likely to be using the book. Now, obviously, it's going to work its way into different areas, and hopefully over time you're going to use it in multiple different ways. But for now, this first version, using it in a particular campaign, in a particular way, you've got the opportunity to write the words on the back that really help those readers move their understanding further forward, make it more likely that they're going to achieve an outcome, make it more likely that they're going to ask you to help achieve that outcome. So we're really looking for excuse me, we're really looking for a way of giving all of those readers an action that they can take next. And we're going to look at an exercise to kind of check off those boxes as we get towards the end here. The next thing to think about is this idea of capturing and engaging. So by capturing, we're talking about, does the back cover copy give a way of capturing additional details? Now, if we're dealing with the online world and digital copies of the book, then we've probably got the details of the person who originally requested it already. But one great opportunity to bear in mind, and it's not the primary thing, but it's a great opportunity, is this thought of the book getting into the hands of people who aren't on your list. So certainly if you're going to list it on Amazon, Amazon doesn't share any details with you on individuals who have bought. So having a way on the back for people to opt in to something is going to be a great way of capturing those people. If you're using the book in a physical sense and you're sharing it with other people, again, you're not necessarily going to have those contact details. If you're using one of the strategies we've got in Beyond the Book is this kind of complementary non-competing businesses. So you might find someone to work with where their customer group crosses over with your customer group quite well, and you can use the book to their audience as a way of adding value to them, but giving you visibility or access to that group of people. Again, depending on the specifics, you might not know individually who those people are. So having a way on the back cover that people can easily, for a very low commitment, opt into something additionally valuable, again, gives you a chance to capture some of these leads. Another thought on the capture piece is it also does a good job of identifying those people who are ready to move already. So you might have the book going to a known group of people. You might be promoting it to an existing non-converted list. But if you've got an easy step on there where people can opt into something else that moves this book journey forwards, then that is going to allow you to identify the warmer prospects on your existing list. Imagine the scenario where you email it out to everyone. There's an intelligent link to see who opens it so that you know that those people have got to that stage. And then there's something on the back that they can opt in for. Again, there's a balance between making people opt in too many times and wanting to identify them. But if there's sufficient value to it, if that threshold of willingness is positioned correctly, then those people opt in, and then you immediately know who the hotter people on an existing list is. So the engagement piece is all around moving people forwards in that journey to understanding where the conversation goes and giving people the opportunity to engage with you and take that next step, not just capturing the new details for people and definitely not just promoting the book itself. So again, all of these mindsets are designed to think about these things ahead of time, to consider it and think about what job and work you've got in order that each part of the book, the cover, the title, the outline structure, the table of content, the content that's actually in the book compared with what's left out, the next steps, all of these things are designed to build to make it the most valuable asset. And again, this is one of those mindsets that it's worth thinking about now because you can really start to move the needle on some of those elements. So I've mentioned this before, the idea that your book is not the product. In a traditional publishing sense, obviously the book is the product. Traditional publishers are interested in selling books. So the job and work of the back cover is to promote the book. If you think about a traditional bookstore example, people are browsing and thumbing through. Their attention is caught by the spine, the title of the book, in the same way that we talked about in Mindset 2. But then they pick it up and typically will possibly flick through it or turn to the back and read the copy that is designed to sell the book. Now for us, in most cases, we've already done that job in the ad. We've got people to the landing page and they've opted in for the book because the ad copy has sold them on it. So the back cover is in no way related to the content of the book because by that point they've already got it. What the back cover is designed to do is move people forward. So if they've been given a physical copy of the book, if they've picked up a physical copy of the book from Amazon, to stick with that example, again, picking it up, flicking through, looking at the table of contents and then turning to the back, we want that back to shortcut to the next step so that people don't have to read all of the content in order to be able to execute something valuable for them and for us in moving the conversation forward. Another element to note on there quickly, this is a little bit like the subheading, is that remember it's all about them and their problem. It's not about you and how great you are. So don't fall into the traditional publishing trap of putting too many testimonials or making it all about how wonderful the book is, because again, why does the reader care about that? They're here to solve a problem and move forward. So again, be careful of thinking about the traditional sense too much. What we're looking to do is identify 5-star prospects, those people who are ready and willing to move forward to solve their problem, hopefully in a way that we can help them. So talking about 5-star prospects, it's worth mentioning this just in a little bit more detail and going through each of the elements. So we're really looking to write for those people who are 5-star prospects, and we're going to treat each stage of the funnel, each part of the mindset, each campaign as if everyone coming in is a 5-star prospect, and we're not going to discount them, but they might discount themselves by either being in the wrong place or not being ready yet. So when we think about what a 5-star prospect is, it's those people who are willing to engage, they're friendly and cooperative, they know what they want, they know when they want it, ideally soon, and then they want us to help them. So those five attributes of the perfect client, if we're writing for those people, writing dedicated to help those people achieve their outcome and eventually get to the 5th place of us helping them now, then that's going to make this tool, this book, the most effective it can possibly be. Because anyone that's not a 5-star prospect, A, isn't ready to go now, and B, we don't want to write for those people in the hope of convincing them to do something different. What we want to do is present all of the information so that when they're ready, we're there waiting for them to help move them to the next stage of the process. So let's wrap up. Quickly recap. We've got making sure that the next step is clear enough for people who only read the back cover. So this is the example of having the physical book. Someone thumbs through it and flips to the back and sees a next step that's clear and easy for them to take. It's the minimum viable commitment for them based on the level of rapport we have with them. And there's an easy next step for them to move forward, because what they want, remember, is the outcome. They don't necessarily want to have to, it's kind of like, don't make me read the book in order to get their outcome. So is the back cover copy clear enough for someone who only reads that and doesn't read the actual content itself? The second one is it relevant, or is it clear to all types of readers? So this one is looking at that capture and engagement piece. Is it clear to those where we're just trying to capture new details from them? And is it clear to those who are ready and willing to move forward? The exercise in the next video goes through this obviously in a little bit more detail. We'll go through a specific example. So if this is unclear, the difference between capture and engage, then definitely check out that video. We'll walk through an example in a little bit more detail. And then the third step is the next step the right position based on their level of understanding, the rapport that they've got with us, the job of work that we want the book to do? Does it tick the box of specificity for this particular funnel? Is it dialed in, or are we running the risk of trying to be too generic and we're trying to do the keyword stuffing thing that we warned about in the subheading mindset of adding in more information in the back cover? Again, we're not looking to do that. We're not looking to go broader. We're looking at going deeper with people and giving them the opportunity to continue this particular conversation, not get sidetracked into something else. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. There is a lot more supporting material here if this hasn't quite landed with you. I know that people, until the penny drops, this is sometimes difficult for people because we're so used to and conditioned to the back cover copy being in a traditional publishing sense. So go check out the MVC video earlier if you skipped past that, if the idea of a minimum viable commitment hasn't yet gelled. And definitely check out the exercise video next if you're thinking about ways of really dialing in your back cover to be very specifically serving these kind of 2 or 3 groups of outcomes that we want to achieve. Okay. As always then, if you want some more help and support, head over to 90minutebooks.com and check out the resources section because we've got more material there. Feel free by all means to reach out to me. This particular mindset is very close to my heart. This really can move the needle for people in terms of how effective their book is. So I spend a lot of time talking to people about this next step element. So if you want to shoot me an email, by all means, stuart@90minutebooks.com, and we'll answer as quick as we can. And as always, if you want to jump on a strategy call, then either give the office a call or drop an email through and we can get some time to chat about your MVC back cover. So with that, I will see you in either the exercise or in Mindset 5. Hey guys, welcome back. My name's Stuart Bell and we're going to dive into Mindset number 5 companion video. We're going to look at a purposeful outline. So there's a couple of reasons why this is important. First is it makes it more likely that you'll get the content written without an outline. Just writing in the hope that you'll create something that kind of makes sense, leads in the right direction, gets done in any reasonable amount of time. I mean, it's just non-existent. It's like the idea of leaving on a journey somewhere and just starting to drive in the hope that you end up at the right place at the right time. So that's the main benefit, obviously helping you get something created. But the secondary benefit is that your outline should ultimately end up as the table of contents of your book. And as we've said before, readership rates are low across the board. Nothing to do with any individual books. It's just that people get hold of a copy of the book with the wanting the outcome, but they don't necessarily want to do the work of reading. So when we think about the main pages that are read, there's the cover, it's the front cover and the back cover. But apart from that, people are typically just flicking And then one of the first pages that they see is the table of contents. And if the table of contents is enough to check that box of, yes, I'm heading in the right direction, then for those people who don't actually get around to complete reading it, they may well be motivated enough to take the next step, which is in the minimum viable commitment call to action, the back cover copy, which we talked about in mindset number 4. So those are the two benefits. One, makes it far more likely that you'll complete something that makes sense and is on target. It kind of does the job of work that you want it to do. And number 2, it gives the readers a table of contents, something that it's very easy for them to see and kind of mentally check that they're in the right place. It's another kind of compelling piece that proves that they're on the right path, and the logical next step is the one that you suggest at the back. So when we look at the structure, we're thinking about things like the preparation, the logical flow, the hitting the main points. It's all of these things around the building blocks of the book that you're creating. So when you're thinking about the outline, and there's various exercises to make the outline work, but when you're thinking about it, it's those start with the end in mind is almost the best approach. So having done the work of the earlier mindsets, knowing who the people are and where you want them to end up, it's almost writing it in reverse order. So start with the next steps, then think about the restating of the problem, the kind of conclusion chapter almost, the fact that you're recapping all of the issues that you've talked about in the book. Then identify what specifically those issues are. So from a slightly general recap, kind of wrapping it all up, then go back a step into, okay, what are the individual elements that I need to cover? And then, of course, you've got an introduction to start. And you can always iteratively go over this. And in fact, it's almost worth doing it. There's an iterative step, which we'll look at in a second, that's talking about simplifying. But it's almost like you have to go through the overly complicated bit in order to get back to the core of the simple model. But by doing it in reverse order, sometimes it's a little bit easier. The other option, if that doesn't flow with everyone's personalities and mindsets are different, so if doing it in reverse order doesn't gel with you and that's just too confusing, or not confusing but complicated, then the other way of doing it is to start with the 3 or 4 main things that people need to know in order to move forward. So if you're looking at answering certain questions, then you can write what those questions are, then jump to the next step, because remember, the book isn't the product, the conversation, the next step, the journey is the product. So go from the 3 or 4 things that they really need to know, the nuts and bolts of the content, to the next step, then come back to the closing statement and restating what the problem is, and then the intro. And then, of course, once you've done all of that, the step then is to look at it and just make sure that it is coherent. So that logical flow from the title through the table of contents to the MVC back cover, you really want to make sure that your outline is the thing that kind of carries them in that journey and kind of builds on each piece of the knowledge. Make sure that you're being as comprehensive as possible without being to the right level, pitching it at the right level. So knowing who that target audience is, make sure that you are answering the promise of the cover of the title, but not necessarily going, and we'll talk about this in Mindset 7 when we talk about beneficial constraints, but make sure that we're not going too deep or too much off at a tangent. Again, what we're trying to do is create something that's valuable, but that gets out the door in a useful amount of time, not sits on the shelf for months or years because you've created too bigger thing to create. So the structure, you're aiming for two elements. One is creating the outline of what you're then going to write about, so you've got some clear definitions there, and then B, that it marries up and creates a useful table of contents so that someone just flicking through sees that and is reassured that they're in the right place, so that they're more likely to take the action that's presented to them once they get to the back cover. So that's the structure piece. The simplify piece is kind of the second stage of the purposeful outline, and that's taking what you've created, what you've brainstormed to create the outline, and then almost cutting half of it, because invariably people are are going too broad, not necessarily too deep, but too broad. So when I talk about cutting things out, that's a case of going back to the job of work, back to the thing that you want the book to do, and making sure that everything that you're talking about answers that question, and not necessarily the elements that are wider than the ones that you want to talk about. Because at the end of the day, you can probably talk about your subject in 3 books worth of stuff. If you've been in business for any length of time, then you know enough content to fill those volumes. But if you do that, it will never get out of the door, and people are less likely to read it because it's even bigger. It's more likely to be too broad and trying to pull in too many people, as opposed to, again, this specific job of work that we're trying to achieve. So what we're looking to do is just simplify the content to make sure that it answers the question promised by the title, that it gives people a clear next step, and that there's a journey that they can progress on. Because, again, you'll hear me say it time after time, the book's not the product, the conversation, the opportunity to work together is the product. So this tool, this book, is using all the psychological benefits of having a book, but what the thing that we're actually creating is a very specific tool to do a certain job of work. And that job of work is to identify the people, help them evidence to themselves that they're in the right place, and move them on to the next step of the journey. So simplifying is a way of making sure that you're on message, on target, and most importantly, maybe that you'll get it done in a reasonable amount of time. So the last thing to check is that we're being clear on the content that we're including. So a lot of people leave this stage to the editing process, and there's definitely an element of editing which talks about clarity. But the better way of doing it is to make sure you address it at the outlining stage, because that will save you from creating content that you just later have to cut. It's not worth including it at the beginning if you're only going to decide later that it should be removed or it should be elsewhere. Making that choice now at this mindset stage is just going to save you a heap of time further down the track, because it just makes the thing that you're creating easier to create. Now, one of the things that I'll say just about the last 2 points about the clarity and the simplifying is, don't throw away any of this work. It's the same with some of the 50-minute focus finder exercises that we did before. We started off with free writing exercises to get everything down, and then we sifted and sorted and kind of drew a line through some of the things that didn't make the cut for this time. But it's useful to have that to use later on. We talk about this in some of the later mindsets, but this ability to engage people after they've opted in for the long term, the 85% of people who aren't ready to go now, we need to provide those people with content further down the track. And some of the things that you might have initially thought about including here, but you've subsequently removed from the outline to keep it purposeful, then that type of content or those content ideas definitely can be used later on in the process. So again, don't feel that there's any downside to removing things, as long as you're removing things for the sake of purpose and clarity. All of that removed information can be used later. And again, the key thing of this is to give yourself a structure so you can get it, so that you will get it created, and create a table of contents that allows people to recognize that they're in the right place and move forward. So there's a couple of options that you can do to get this outlining and the table of contents created. There's numerous outlining tools, and actually the exercise video for this mindset, we talk about some outlining options if that's not something that you're familiar with so far. Because we know that we want to create an outline that makes it easy for us to do, but B, create this table of contents that moves people forward. The last step in the process is just reviewing that second stage with the outline written, with the headings like chapter titles and maybe 1 or 2 bullets below it, just kind of as pointers or aid memoirs to make sure that you don't miss anything. Looking at that structure, knowing what your title is and what your call to action is, and making sure that each chapter on there does its job of moving people towards that outcome. This table of contents review is a great step to take that few people do outside of this process, because they just don't think about it this way. But it's a great job because it really does serve that purpose of moving people forward. And if you've missed anything, if there's anything that goes off at a tangent, it kind of goes broad instead of wide, just looking at this table of contents view, thinking of it as a table of contents, will really help you identify either any pieces that are missing or any pieces that are unnecessary and don't really keep that journey going, again, from the title to the call to action. And just on that point, I mean, this is why we've structured the mindsets in this way. Oftentimes people think about the book from a start to finish process, whereas we've got the call to action early in the process. After we've decided what's going to get people to raise their hand, we immediately jump into the end of the process and the next step. But that's because all of those elements inform these middle two mindsets of creating a purposeful outline and valuable content, which is the next mindset. So the structure that we've got is this way around for a reason. If you've jumped into mindset 5 now and you're listening along to this and you've skipped some of the other ones, if you've skipped it because you've got a high score and you're confident with what you've done, that's great. If you skipped it just because you haven't got around to it, or you're thinking, oh, I don't need that, I just want to get to the creating piece, then go back and validate your ideas in the earlier mindsets, because they really do inform these next couple of stages. Okay, so with that, I will leave you to it. We've got a exercise video in this module, this mindset, which is very much just looking at the outlining tools. So if outlining tools is something you're comfortable with, feel free to skip that. We're not really talking about any book stuff specifically in there. If you need any additional support, then as always, you can reach out to us at 90minutebooks.com, send me an email or call into the office, and we'll answer as many questions as we can, as quickly as we can. And if you want to schedule a strategy call, we're always happy to do that as well. So there's links on the 90-Minute Book site for that. Okay, thank you, and we will catch you in the next one. Hey there guys, welcome back to Mindset 6. Stuart Bell here. We're going to run through your value-driven content. The reason we've included this module is, having helped over 800 books get created, this is something that we see more often than perhaps we'd like, is this idea of people being scared to give away all of their content for free in the book. Now, the reality of what that means, of course, is nonsense, because there are very, very few ideas out there that are absolutely unique. If someone wants to Google around for something, they're almost certainly going to come across your information or the same information but presented by someone else. So there's very limited uniqueness about something being created. What it does do, though, it creates a barrier in the relationship and the rapport that you're trying to build. So much better to share as much as you can to specifically answer this question. So don't give away everything. There's always more that people could know, but make sure that we're specifically answering this question by giving that value in the content, rather than coming from a kind of a scarcity mindset and being concerned that you're going to give away all the secrets and therefore people won't need to speak to you. If people don't speak to you because of what's in the book, then they were never going to be clients anyway. It's very, very, very unlikely that you would ever write something comprehensive enough so that the people who were motivated or likely to do business with you don't, just because they think they've ticked that they've resolved their problem in the book. What you're much more likely to do is engage that next tier of people down, who either think they can do it themselves but realize they can't, or think that you're the right person but now are sure you're the right person because you're the expert, you've written the book on the subject, so now they do come and see you. So it's definitely lead with a giving hand and present this information rather than trying to hold stuff back. So this is an interesting module. It's certainly very important, and one that can be reviewed in conjunction with the previous mindsets as we're looking at that kind of purposeful outline. So specifically when we're looking at the content, then we want to consider 3 elements. So there's the value that we're providing, the idea of being deep versus wide, and then this idea of making sure that you deliver on the promise of the title, the thing that you've, the reason that people have come here in the first place. So when we think about value, this goes deeper into what I was just talking about. This Gary Vaynerchuk's the jab, 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 right hook example is a great way of thinking about it. The kind of give, 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 ask in a world now where knowledge isn't necessarily power, because knowledge is everywhere. It's the application of knowledge and the use of knowledge which is the important thing. And people have become very used to the environment where they're not necessarily paying for information, or there's no expectation that they can't find information if they go looking for it. But what people are definitely realizing is that there's an abundance of information, and quality, it's difficult to identify quality over quantity, or just the fact that they don't have time to resolve it. They might have the intention to resolve it themselves, but they realize that this isn't something that they're going to get to, or it's too complicated. In the last module, I was using the example of Jim Hacking's immigration book on the fiancé visa route, and the assessment that they've got as the second option on their back cover. Here, complete the assessment that goes through or the checklist rather, that goes through all of the paperwork that you need in order to present the case. Perfect example. All of that information is out there. There's no special source about what he's providing, but what he does provide is a certainty, a surety, a quality of we're going to present the case in the best possible way. And by people reading and understanding the totality of the documents that they need, often motivates people to engage Jim just to do it for them. So the second thing that we want to think about is this idea of building a relationship. And ideally, we want to go into this with the mindset of, I want to give people as much value as possible, even if they never do anything else with me, even if they never engage us to do any work, or they never ask us any questions. If I can make sure that this particular asset gives as much value as possible within the constraints of the book itself, then that's going to set you up for all of those people who do then go on to do work with you. They'll have had the same experience. So again, it goes back to this idea of the people who aren't going to be your clients, you can't do anything about them. But the people who are likely to be your clients, make the experience for them, make the experience for those 5-star prospects as good as it can be, so that it's more likely that more of them will convert. Don't worry about this scarcity of not wanting to give stuff away to people who would never be clients anyway, because it's irrelevant. What we're looking at doing is increasing that rapport so we can increase the ask, and their threshold of willingness to work with us is met at the point that we've delivered all of this value. The other thing, just talking about the depth of the content before we move on to the next one, is that we're really looking to start that conversation. And if the book provides someone with a very comprehensive answer to the beginning part of their journey, then they're much more likely to think that if you know and you're willing to share all of this information, then you must have a whole host of other things that obviously are outside of the book, but your complete knowledge set is much bigger. It not only kind of establishes you as the person in that world, as their expert in that world, but it also just kicks off the whole conversation in a much more positive, giving way. And that's what we're looking to do. We're looking at starting the conversation, because we know it's only through several steps of the conversation that they're eventually going to get to the point where they can become a client. So make sure that we're giving as much as we can and not trying to hold it back. The second point then is deep rather than wide, and this goes into the next mindset that we're going to talk about, beneficial constraints. But this idea of deeply answering a narrow but valuable subject as comprehensively as possible is really the thing that's going to move the needle on taking that conversation forwards. Because the opposite of that, the thing that we can very much try to avoid, is just being very broad and superficial, because no one gets any value from it. If it's very clear that you're just answering kind of in order to move people through, or holding some things back, people can detect that and can feel it, or they just don't get value from the content because it's not comprehensive enough. So if we've worked through our scope well, if we know what the job of work is we're trying to do, we've assessed the audience and we know what their language is, what their pain points are, what their conversation is, we know the question that they're asking that becomes the title of our book, and we've worked through the outline to make sure that we're answering that very comprehensively, then the content naturally falls from that. It's almost just like filling in the blanks at this point. We can be very confident that we're laser targeted on subject. We're answering the questions comprehensively as possible to make the reader feel good and feel reassured that the next step that we're going to suggest to them is the one that they should take. And there's this idea that the book isn't the product, so not everything has to be in the book itself. We're not trying to justify a $20 cover price. we're starting a conversation with people to try and engage them and move them forward. So if there are things that start falling out a degree of separation away from our core topic, then we can always point people to that in the follow-up sequence. So there's no need to try and go wide and then find yourself writing into a rabbit hole of getting stuck with more and more chapters. We can be laser focused on our job of work, make sure that's as comprehensive as possible, always knowing that there's a world of more stuff, but that more doesn't have to be in the book, because that's what's going to make the readers feel good. They're going to identify the problem in the title, opt in to get the answers to that problem, feel like their question's been answered, and then compelled or encouraged or motivated to take the next step, which is the thing that we really want them to do. So the last point, just to reiterate there, is delivering on that promise. We really want to make sure that what we're giving them is comprehensive enough that they're feeling good about it. So not only does this idea of value-driven content and keeping it laser focused make it easier for us to write, but it also makes it easier for them to read. So not only are we answering their question, but we're answering it in an easy way that makes it that doesn't make them feel bad, doesn't make them feel like they've got a whole other job to do in order to just get the answer to that one question, doesn't make them feel like that they've made mistakes in the past, or or at least that they're to blame for the mistakes. Unavoidable mistakes are something else, but we don't want to kind of lay the blame on people's door and say that they intentionally made poor decisions. So making sure that we deliver on that promise so that they can feel good at the outcome, again, just streamlines the process through to them being more likely to take that next step. And the next step is what we want them to do. So definitely a case of don't hold back, make sure that the scope is constrained and narrow enough that we're able to answer that question without either writing ourselves into a hole of effort, or just being very superficial and kind of not delivering on the promise that we make to people. So this idea of making sure that we're delivering, there's a couple of ways of achieving that, of validating the idea. One of the easiest ways is to have someone else review the table of contents. So this is kind of before we're actually writing the content. If we've got the table of contents, the outline that has the chapter headings and the subheadings, the memory joggers to make sure that we're comprehensively filling it in, have someone else who knows the subject review that is a great way to make sure that we're delivering the value promised in the title, because they'll hopefully be able to identify if we've got any gaps. And then once they've identified it, we can make the decision of whether we want to include it or not. But taking that extra step just before we start writing the content and making sure that we are covering that value proposition is a great way of saving time. Likewise, we were talking about limiting the scope in the outline, that all of the elements in there are the important elements and we're not including anything that should be removed. Doing the same exercise once we've got the content, once we've got the ideas for the content, just reviewing it again, it's a little bit of duplication from the previous mindset, but it's well worth doing now, because again, what we're trying to create is a book that is valuable to the readers, but that it's something that you can create and get out the door, and 2021 doesn't turn into 2025 before you actually get this done. So it's worth at this stage just doing a quick review. And it might well be the case that you've taken that outline, you've reviewed the outline, it's got the memory joggers in there, but as part of the value creation process, the value-driven content, you might have elaborated on each of those mindsets a little bit more. You've grabbed your piece of paper with all of the notes on and then just elaborated on those. And getting someone to give a quick sanity check of that to make sure that it's relevant is often a good use of time. Now, the only caveat that I'd put on that is be careful of whose opinions you take too much. So someone coming to this project with a traditional publishing mindset, thinking about a book that they might buy from the store or off the shelf, they might come with some baggage and some suggestions on how you should make changes to the book that are different from this model that we're working to. So if you can disconnect it from the outcome and not necessarily tell the person that they're reviewing a book outline, but instead say, hey, if this is a question, are there any other elements here that have been missed, or are there any other elements that don't answer that question? Kind of detaching it from what the product is, that's often a good reminder for people, because this idea of people getting stuck into a traditional publishing mindset of what a book should be, again, you're just potentially opening the door to someone suggesting that a lot of things need to be added, which they don't. So the last bullet point on the main steps here, we're talking about ensuring that it's progressing towards a solution. Again, that's just really reiterating the previous point of the outline, leading from the title to the call to action. But from a content point of view, this is just making sure that either before you come to write the content or after you've written it, when you're reviewing it, just make sure that it is all still leading in that same direction. So again, just a sanity check to make sure that we're on this laser focused route of problem in the title, content answering the first stage of the process, suggestion on what to do next, and how people can move through that and feel good about the process. So as part of the 90-minute book process, we've got a content template that we're often used with people. Our guys are very good at kind of extracting this outline from people on their behalf. That's kind of one of the key benefits that we bring into the process in this early stage. So distilling the ideas into this meaningful outline. But the template, even if you're not working with us, is valuable. So check out the exercise video, because I'll run through a couple of those examples, because it just helps give a little bit of structure to how you might lay out the content that you're thinking about writing, having done the outline to know what it is that, what the framework is. Now you need to start adding the detail in, and the content template is just a bit of a handy pointer to keep you in those rails of the project moving forward. Okay, so if that's something that's useful, check out that exercise video next. We've got, as always, the 9-Minute Book website that's got some more resources. If you want to shoot me an email or drop a call into the office, we'll answer as many questions as we can. And as always, a strategy call's there if you want it. More than happy to jump on a quick call with you and run through any questions that you might have. Okay, so thanks everyone. I will catch you in the next one. Hey there guys, welcome back. Stuart Bell here. We're going to dive into Mindset 8, looking beyond your book. Now, if you've followed along with the other mindsets, none of this is going to be a surprise when we say that your book is not the product. Your book is the way of starting a conversation, and those conversations have a number of steps through to completion. So by thinking like a chess player, by orchestrating the journey, we know that the book is only one part of it. It's a fantastic part of it. It's one of the best ways of starting that conversation, of getting people into the funnel in the first place or moving them to the next step. But it's still only one step. So we shouldn't necessarily be disappointed that just having the book by itself magically transforms our business. There's a whole number of reasons why it's very, very beneficial, and it certainly ticks a lot of the boxes to move things forward. But as far as specific direct response marketing funnels go, the book is the perfect start to a funnel that then leads people in the direction that we want them to go. So when we're looking at Mindset 8 and thinking about how we can amplify our mindset of beyond the book once the book is complete, then there's really three areas that we're going to look at. We're going to look at now versus later. We're just going to reinforce that point. We're going to look specifically at the follow-up sequence, and then this idea of your flagship broadcast. So when we think about it in terms of now versus later, it comes back to the model I've mentioned earlier, that 85% of people, of the ones who are going to do business with you, 85% of them, it's not going to be in the next 90 days. Now, this varies depending on your own buying cycle. We talked about that way back in Mindset 1 when we were picking the target market and the language that they use. But a large proportion of people don't do business day one. Let me just anecdotally give you some evidence from the 90-minute book business. Obviously, I mentioned at the beginning we started in 2013, so it's now 2021. So we're coming up for 7 years or so into this, and we're still working with people who we had conversations with 4, 5, 6 years ago to begin with, and now they're just coming back to actually get this first book written. So that's obviously the extreme end of the spectrum, but we're definitely in a situation where there's a 2 or 3 year cycle where a lot of people just take that long to decide to actually get around to doing it. Obviously, the last couple of years probably aren't the best example to think about in terms of timeframes because so many things were different. But it's definitely the case that fewer people are ready to go now. This isn't a consumable type business where these are small value purchases where people can make on the fly, on the whim type decisions. This is more of a bigger ticket item. There's a little bit more to it than just saying yes, go. But even so, regardless of what your business is, it's key to understand that it's the minority of people who go today, the majority of them that go at some point in the future. So what we're looking at doing is staying in touch with those people over that longer term so that you're there ready for them whenever they decide that their time is now and today's the day that they get moving. So when we look at the immediate follow-up sequence deals with the autoresponder, deals with those people who are ready to go now, but it's quite often that people forget about this longer term option that's in the broadcast, that's in the flagship broadcast opportunity to stay in touch. Now, that's obviously not to say that the follow-up isn't important. It absolutely is. We want to be there ready to go as soon as people are ready to go. So when we look at the immediate follow-up sequence, again, this idea that your book itself isn't converting people, the book is the first step in the process. Then the follow-up sequence are these things over the next few days. Once someone raises their hand and opts in, again, we're going to stick with our opt-in example rather than like the Amazon example, which is that's more into a longer term conversion. But the immediate opt-in, whether that's from LinkedIn ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, a link in your bio or super signature, or whether it's a referral channel in which people then opted in, then that initial follow-up sequence is the thing that we want to do in the first few days that tries to convert as many people as are ready to convert, that 15% of people who are ready to go in the short term. So the first thing that we want to do, and this is difficult for some people to get comfortable with doing, particularly if you come from a corporate background, is make the follow-up as personal as possible. You want to imagine that although this is an autoresponder going to everyone that opts in, imagine that you're writing it as if you're writing it to one individual person. So one-to-one language, not one-to-many language, language that is kind of a little bit more accessible and individual rather than just broadcasting and corporate speak. What we like to refer to as the Starbucks test. Make sure to write like a human. Quite often when people are writing, they'll write overly formal. And if you actually read it back out loud, if you kind of get someone to print the email off and then turn your back to someone and have them read it to you, does it sound like you're writing as a human to another human? Is this something that you would say to someone in a queue at Starbucks? Or is this kind of stilted corporate speak that just sounds like it's aliens have landed in it trying to kind of get to grips with English? So the aim of the follow-up sequence is to start that conversation and move people towards a buying decision. Now, for anyone who's got a product that is a high ticket value or high touch item, then trying to convert people from the email straight to a buying page, some people who are very warm may well do that, but for a lot of other people, they need some more one-on-one hand-holding or conversational back and forth, kind of the conversational conversions idea rather than just converting to a landing page. So aim to try and engage people, ask questions, this idea of a spear email, which is something that we refer to internally a lot, which is short, personal, expecting a reply. Hey Mary, are you ready to get your book started this month? Or hey Bob, have you chose a title yet? These things that are trying to elicit a response from someone, a lot of people fear doing that, thinking that they'll get overwhelmed. But again, the reality, like we said in an earlier mindset of including your name and email address in communications, the reality of getting overwhelmed is a good problem to have if that ever becomes the case, or B, honestly not likely to happen because most people don't respond, even if they're relatively engaged and enthusiastic, they don't get around to it. So it's not a situation that you're going to be in where it's not a situation where you're likely to be overwhelmed by the responses. And again, if you are, that's a good problem to have because in theory, all of these potential customers are excited to engage with you. So with that follow-up sequence, as well as making it personal and engaging and trying to elicit a conversation, we really want to kind of amplify why they were there in the first place and give them a very clear next step in order to take an action. So if we assume that a certain percentage of those people who have opted in are really ready to move, then we want to write for those 5-star prospects and allow everyone to go through that sequence of getting to the end where they can have a very clear direction of where to go next and not stop that too early and think that the leads have gone dead just because they're not responding to the initial email where the book was delivered to them. So this follow-up sequence is the thing that's trying to engage that 15% of people who are the hottest, the ones that are ready to move now. Once they get to the end of that sequence, then we really want to drop everyone into a flagship, what we call a flagship broadcast approach. And that is ideally weekly emails going out to everyone who hasn't yet converted. Because remember, we don't know when people are ready to say today's the day for them. The idea of wombat selling, the check moves approach that we mentioned in an earlier mindset, this idea of you can't force someone to convert, but you can put conversion opportunities in front of them at a regular time frame, so that when they are ready, hopefully that corresponds with an email that you send out. So this idea of sending out a regular flagship broadcast after they've got to the end of the cycle is really going to be the way that you can stay in touch with people over the long term. And the idea of a content calendar, at the end of the day, this is just 52 messages that we're talking about. If that's overwhelming, if that's too many, start with monthly, then go to every 2 weeks. So go from 12 to 26 and then to 52. Build up this sequence that you've got so that you can regularly stay in touch with people and regularly present them with the opportunity to raise their hand and say, yes, now today's the day that I'm ready to get started. Remember I was saying about the 90-minute book process. We've got people 2-3 years after they opted into the list. When we send out the monthly 9-word email saying, are you ready to get started? People will respond and say yes and actually start the process years after they joined the list. If we never sent that broadcast, then we would never know that they were ready to get going. One of the resources that is great for this type of approach is check out emailmastery.com. There's one of our books or our internal books that we wrote is available on that URL. And that will give you some further great ideas about how to engage people both in the short term and the long term and really become a master at this conversational conversions. So in terms of that initial autoresponder, now that we've got this idea in place of the initial response to follow up and then the longer term flagship broadcast, when we think about the specifics of this, a great model to employ for the initial follow up is this kind of seven-step follow-up sequence. So you can see it on the screen here. I'll just quickly run through it. The first one is obviously you want to deliver the copy of the book because that's what people opted in for. That's what they're interested in. So we want to deliver that to them. And we don't want to overwhelm them with a whole load of other stuff because we know that this is a stage. This is just one of 7 emails. So that first message can just be a short personal, hey Mary, here's the copy of the book. And if you opted into the 90-minute book sequence, you would have seen the same. The second one is this idea of the spear question, because what we're trying to do is engage the people who are the hottest as quick as possible. So we'll follow up with a message saying, hey Mary, have you chosen a book title yet? Or hey Mary, what business are you in? These things that are short, personal, expecting a reply, trying to elicit that conversation. The third message then is something to amplify the thing that they downloaded for. So for us, I think in the sequence at the moment, we've got some Facebook ad responses. Don't quote me on that, we change it relatively regularly. So I think at the moment we've got a case study of some Facebook details that we put around that ad that we put out for the 90-minute book. The fourth one on the list then, we include an offer. So remind people of a way to get started. Then another amplifying email. You can possibly include like a case study type message at this point, although the case study, again, be wary of the corporate language versus the personal one-on-one language. So although I refer to it as a case study message, what I'm actually referring to is a message that amplifies something in your book based on a real life story. So a little bit more of evidence backed up by an anecdote rather than specifically a case study. because you say case study and people can think about delivering it in a very corporatized way. So another amplifying or case study message, another spear message to try and engage people. So bear in mind at this point, people have been on the list for 5 or 6 days. We want to give them a final opportunity to answer and engage if they're going to. Maybe they missed the first spear question and now they're more inclined to engage. And then the last one in the sequence, because we have to draw a line under the sequence at some point. So the last one is just a very explicit offer to get started. Sometimes you've probably experienced this yourself. You're very enthusiastic about something, but it just doesn't float to the top enough to overcome all of the day-to-day kind of resistance just to get going, the kind of inertia to pull the trigger on something. So at the end of the sequence, an explicit offer of, hey, you should do this, is often enough to shake the tree of that last 15% of people who are ready to get started today. So you can see there, we've got a 7-step follow-up sequence. Now, again, we want to get you out the door, so you don't want to be holding up the whole thing in order to make the perfect 7-step sequence. Start with one and move from there. You can build over time. It's definitely not the case that you need all of this in place before you start at all. But this gives a relatively straightforward, relatively short follow-up sequence to engage people, again, around the specifics of what you're offering. So outside of that, if people get to the end and then haven't converted, then we're talking about this flagship broadcast follow-up. So we talked about ideally a weekly message. Some people can find that idea overwhelming, but when you start breaking it down, actually that's not too bad. Break it down into 12 months and then 4 messages per month. So one message can be a spear type message, asking people who are on the list still a direct question. Another one can be a calendar-based thing. That way you're only looking for 12 calendar-based things in order to write around. And this flagship broadcast, once you've got these 52 messages written once, then you can reuse them year after year after year, because it's a long enough time frame that people aren't going to remember that you sent the same message 12 months ago. There can be something related to the industry. So I think the last one I mentioned was calendar. So calendar-based, industry-based, and then the last one can be news-based, just something that happens in the news. And if that means that you have to write these year by year or week by week, then that's fine. You're just down to then 12 messages a year, with the others being automated. So it doesn't have to be that overwhelming. What we're aiming to do is be conversational, include a super signature, which is something that clearly points people in the direction of what they can do next, and then pick the medium that works the best for you. So whether it's text in just the email, whether it's audio or video or imagery, whatever the thing is that makes it the most easy to stay in touch. The main thing that you're looking to do is send people something that includes that super signature, that reminds them that you exist, that gives them some additional useful, valuable information within the thing that they express an interest for, and then do that on a regular basis so that hopefully you can meet up with the point that they become ready, and then they can see the super signature message that clearly points them in the direction of taking a next step. And then if they're ready on that day, hopefully that means that they're more likely to convert at that point, convert in the sense of taking the next step, than they would be if you either didn't do this at all or just sent out the traditional kind of corporate newsletter type approach, which becomes a little bit like background noise, and the open rate is very, well, as we know, it's very low on that type of message. So in terms of the content calendar, just a couple of quick ideas on things to do. On the screen at the moment, there's like the idea generator tool that we sometimes use with people. Again, Google's your friend in this instance. Google content calendar for your particular industry, and you'll be inundated with ideas. If there's not enough ideas from the text search, then maybe go a little bit broader with the words, or do an image search instead, and you might see a lot of images that trigger images relative to your industry that trigger some ideas for things that you can write about. So I won't run through all of these. You can see it on screen now. Putting those in place so that you've got them over the next 12 months, again, just having something written out ahead of time makes it much easier that you can start filling in those gaps. And for the first year, if you only start with one a month, then that's fine. Build this over time so you're kind of building this marketing arsenal of assets that you can deploy, all of them leading back to your call to action, the thing that you want people to do in order to get started. So those things, you can download those two examples there. It's in the calendar example that we've got. As always, if you've got any questions about this, what we're really looking at doing is get you moving to the point of being out of the door. So don't get too hung up on this thing. Mindset 8 is definitely the beyond the book level. But if you've got any questions about this, as always, then head over to 90 Minute Books, because there's more resources. Actually, if you haven't checked out the podcast under the resource section, there's a whole load of examples there of other people from various industries who have jumped on a call with us, and we've gone through some of their successes and used their case studies to kind of illustrate these ideas and how it's been beneficial. So head over to the website and check out the podcast. But then, as always, if you want to shoot us an email or drop us a call, happy to answer any questions that we can, or to schedule a strategy call to run through some specifics with you. Okay, so with that, we've got one last exercise video in Mindset 8. So definitely, if you're at the stage where you've moved forward, you've got through all of your other scores, you're in the process of creating it, or you can see the light at the end of the tunnel as far as creating goes, then this last exercise is what we refer to as the 5 simple steps to take after you've completed it. So hold off on this last video until you've got a little bit further down the track. You don't need to have completed any of these last exercise steps in order to get your book completed. So go ahead, get that completed, then come back and join us with the last exercise that we're doing, which is 5 simple things that you can do to amplify your book once it's completed. I just want to take a moment to say thank you for joining. If you're listening to this, then you've probably been pretty committed at going all the way through the videos. Definitely take us up on the offer for the strategy call. Definitely take us up on the offer to do it for you. We really believe that it's the quickest and easiest way and the cheapest way of getting it out there, the most cost-effective way of getting it out there, because we can take all of this heavy lifting and do it for you. But even if you're doing it yourself, by all means, jump on a strategy call. Well, I'm always super excited to talk to people who have got this far and they're really looking at getting a book out there to engage their audience, add some value back in, and really do something to amplify their video. So thanks again. One more exercise video to go. I'll see you there. Hey there guys, Stuart Bell here. Welcome to the exercise video for mindset number 5. Now this is a bit of a random one compared with the other book exercises, because it's not specifically to do with your book as such, but it's just an overview of outlining tools. So if you're comfortable with an outlining tool of choice already, skip this one. It isn't, there's nothing special here. If outlining is something new to you, or you haven't really got a tool in mind or a way of doing it, then this quick video is going to be super useful, because we'll give a few ideas for how to get started. So with that, there's 3 main approaches really to outlining. There's a list approach, a mind map approach, and a Kanban approach. There's no right or wrong answer. It is 100% personal preference. The only caveat that I wanted to put here is, again, going back to that traditional publishing overhead model that we've warned against in some of the other mindsets. The same applies with outlining. There are a couple of fantastically useful tools if you're writing a book, a fiction book, where you need to keep a track of multiple different characters and storylines and arcs and collect massive data or background information or supporting material. Tools like Ulysses and Scrivener are very, very, very good for something like that. For writing a 9-minute book where there's a specific job of work, using information that you're already familiar with, completely over the top. And unless you're very familiar with those tools, the learning curve of getting up to speed with them is just another reason why you'll never get this project finished. So the advice is avoid those unnecessary complexities. They're great tools for what they do. Unnecessary here. It's like when people are talking about CRM. We just had a coffee this morning with Dean and talking to a guy that we'd bumped into. We were talking about CRM tools, and as you do at coffee, talking about CRM tools, and just talking about the difference between GoGo Clients, which is our own CRM tool, and Infusionsoft, which is at the complete other end of the spectrum. Infusionsoft is fantastic for the people who need that functionality, but for, I would say, 95% of people out there, it's unnecessary. And time after time, we run into people who have got all of these overheads and complexities trying to use a tool that's not fit for purpose. It's just over-engineered. So with that, 3 options: lists, mind maps, and Kanban, and it's entirely up to you which one you prefer. Lists are the easiest to think about because everyone, right from a very young age, has written a list of things to do. The easiest way is just a pencil and paper. If you could see, I don't know if you can see that, this is my list of videos for this that we're recording now. My handwriting gets smaller and smaller as the list gets more and more full. The journal, which is just over there, has got a list of activities to do with very many small scrawls all around it. I use pencil and paper all the time, more so probably than some of the, certainly for list building, more than some of the online tools, just because I've always got it with me and it's easy to do. But it's completely up to you, whatever you feel most comfortable with. The downside of just writing, obviously, is it's difficult to reorder, so not particularly productive from that point of view, which is why my outlining tool of choice is actually mind mapping, which we'll get onto next. But whatever you feel most comfortable with, the key here, and you'll see it on a later slide, is just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't think that the only way this is going to be successful is if you've got a particular tool. Just pick whatever is easiest and closest to hand and go ahead from there. The 2 things I will mention in terms of tools, though, if lists are something that you do a lot of and you feel very comfortable with it, but you haven't quite found the right tool that matches what you need, 2 great examples are Omni Outliner and Tree. Tree is, I use it as a Mac app sometimes. Omni Outliner is a service that spreads across multiple tools, but both of them are just ways of list writing that will allow you to reorder and group together and expand and collapse. So if you've got a bigger project where you're more likely to need to move things around, then one of those 2 tools might be the way to go. But again, as I've said already, don't get carried away with the tools. The tools aren't going to make a difference here. It's just writing it on a piece of paper and writing it wherever to get it down. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to make this project, get your book out there. We're trying to make it as straightforward and as simple as possible. And the project isn't that big. We're not trying to overcomplicate it. We're not trying to do all of those additional things today. Today, we're just trying to move forward and get the outline completed so we can move to the next stage. So there's some examples for lists. Let's look at mind maps. So as I said, mind mapping is you probably, for anything that's more than just an action list, really, then mind mapping is the way that I go. You can do this on paper or iPad. The easiest way of doing a mind map, again, a lot of this is personal preference, but the easiest way of doing a mind map, I think, is to have the flexibility to break out of just a structure. So it's whatever allows you to write and flow freely and join the dots and expand the trees, the legs, as much as possible. So there are a couple of tools that are available, but for me, the key difference is if you can have a tool that allows you to keep your fingers on the keyboard. So if I'm not just jotting something down on paper and making some connections there loosely, then my personal preference is for iThoughts. There may well be other tools that can do this now, but I've used iThoughts for years. And the reason was it was one of the first tools that would allow you to do it all by keyboard shortcuts. So space 3 times would get a child node and enter 3 times would get a sibling node. So by just starting typing and keeping your fingers on the keyboard, you can expand that mind map and get the child nodes and the sibling nodes all without breaking that kind of muscle memory of being on the keyboard. So again, lists versus mind maps, they're effectively the same thing. In fact, there are tools out there that will allow you to switch from one to the other using a kind of an underlying export language, but it's just absolute personal preference which you prefer, and there's no right answer. The only advice is to pick the one that is the easiest for you and don't get carried away thinking that you need a tool in order to make it work. Kanban then is the last option, and this is something slightly different. Might not be a term that's familiar to everyone, but Trello is one of the earliest tools that kind of celebrated this way of working, because a Kanban board basically is a column list view of the activities grouped under the headings, and then each individual element is underneath it and you can move it around. And you can structure a Kanban board so that it is kind of linear in its progression from beginning to end. So the easiest way of thinking about it is having a whiteboard with post-it notes where you just put the categories in the columns and then write the subheadings, the the child nodes in a mind map on a post-it, and then you can move them around as necessary. As I say, Trello was another tool that really took this idea and turned it into software. There's another one called Kanban Flow. Some people prefer writing in this format. I'd say that this one is probably the one that is least relevant for people unless you're very familiar with working in this way and you just want to structure it in that particular organization. In my experience, it's mainly linked to people using particular tools, because then they can add other data to that particular card on the board, so they can mark it as read or add links and references. So again, unless you're familiar with it, this is probably one that falls into the it's too complicated to use it just for the sake of this purpose. So that's a quick overview of tools. Like I say, whichever one you pick, there's no right or wrong answer, but I would definitely pick one in order to get their outline dialed in and then refined, based on the explainer video that we had just above this exercise video. So pick one. There's no right or wrong answer. You can always change it later. Don't get caught up in the tools. There's get caught up in tools is just a distraction. So if you're struggling with what to do and don't know which one to pick, then just pencil and paper and just list it out, and then cross it out and rewrite the list if you need to when you're doing the revision process. So I hope that helps. As always, just reach out to us if you've got any questions. Always happy to help if we can. Either shoot an email to me at stuart@90minutebooks.com or call into the office and we'll answer as many questions as we can. And always happy to do a strategy call. So that's Mindset 5. We've got our purposeful outline written. Now the next thing we're going to look at in Mindset 6 is this idea of value-driven content. So I'll see you there. Hey everybody, welcome back. Stuart Bell here. We are diving into the companion video for Mindset number 7, which is beneficial constraints. Now, that term, beneficial constraints, is something that throws people the first time that they hear it, because constraints usually aren't thought of as beneficial. But honestly, necessity is the mother of invention, and really it's only by constraining yourself that you'll get this project finished. Because the reality is, most people, if you talk to them about writing a book, anyone that's ever done it in the past, always refers to what a nightmare it is to get it done. You've got to lock yourself away in a cabin in the woods with no distractions just to make sure that you get through the process. And part of that problem is that they haven't assigned constraints or haven't committed to some constraints that really make sure that the project stays on track. What most people will do is think, oh, this is something that I should do. I've got some knowledge. I've got a general idea. I'm going to make a start. And then before they know it, a year's gone by. They've written 10,000 words and not really got anywhere. And the whole project grinds to a halt. And years later, in fact, it's pretty funny in a way at 90 Minute Books, because we've been around for so long now, that we often talk to people who we originally spoke to 3, 4, 5 years ago, and then they disappeared with the intention of doing it themselves, and now come back with all of that time elapsed, not actually having got very far in the process. So this idea of beneficial constraints, we're going to think of it in 3 main ways. We're going to think about it in terms of scope. And in some of the other mindsets, we've talked about scope already, so some of it is kind of reinforcing that, but from the constraints position. We're going to talk about distractions, and we're going to talk about deadlines. So these 3 things, if you kind of embrace these constraints, are really make it much more likely that the project will get completed and out the door than if you just went into this thinking, it'll be fine, I'm just going to write, and then we'll take it from there, we'll come together. So beneficial constraints, it's really that constraint that's going to make it much more successful. So when we think about scope, we're really thinking about the content side of things, and this idea that bigger is better, or I don't want to go through the effort of doing the outline. I know when to stop. I'll just stop when I've talked about so much. The problem there is that you don't know when to stop at a certain point. The risk is that you'll either stop too soon or more likely stop too late, and you'll write unnecessary words, which takes time. And the reality is that every word that you write that's unnecessary, it's burning a multiple of its own time. So you either have to spend time taking it out, or it will get edited, or then it needs to come out afterwards, or it's just not really making the boat go faster. Those additional things that you're writing really isn't making any difference to the practical use of the book and how many people will then eventually become clients. So this idea of making it as easy and as streamlined as possible to deliver the value that you promise, this idea of scope creep is one of the biggest killers to getting the project completed and out of the door. The other thing that people often don't think about, often we talk about scope, and so far we've talked about scope in terms of you as the writer creating it, you as the author creating it, but actually scope is a benefit for the readers as well, because like we've said before, the readership rates are vastly lower than the purchase rates or the opt-in rates. It's the minority of people who actually complete reading something rather than successfully get to the end of it. So by giving the respect to the readers that you're going to create something that's on target and answers the question and doesn't go off on a whole load of irrelevant tangents means that it's a much better experience from the reader. They are actually more likely to read a 60-page book than a 200-page book. They are more likely to read something that clearly stays on subject and they can complete in an hour rather than requiring days and days worth of reading. So scope creep and the constraints that it provides is actually a benefit to everyone. And really the key is it's only by doing that are you actually going to get the project completed. Otherwise, this is going to be something that a year's going to go by and you're going to be looking back on a file on your computer and thinking, oh, I really should get that finished. So the second thing that we're thinking about is distractions. Now, oftentimes people will think of distractions in terms of other people. So again, that kind of meme of the author taking themselves away and locking the door and not having any people come in to distract. But for most people, the distractions really are around adding additional things to the book, unnecessary things, not interruptions from people, although that obviously is a concern, but it's the not knowing when to finish or the shiny object syndrome. Now, I'm going to say this with a smile on my face because obviously we've included QR codes and videos that support this book project, and that is absolutely not what I would recommend anyone else do. And peeking behind the curtain slightly, this book, I actually completed it 6 months ago. It's November as I'm recording this today. This is the second time that I've recorded all of these videos because the first time, which was about 3 months ago, we got to the end of them and then realised that the audio was all screwed up on them. So it's taken 3 months to psychologically get around to recording them again. And that's 6 months when this book could have been out there engaging way more people. So an open look behind the screen at what we've done. But the reason I mention it is to demonstrate that even as the people who are doing this for hundreds of books a year, for helping people day in, day out, for being able to deliver on all of the rest of the process in a very streamlined way because we do it so often, it was this element of distractions and additional chrome, additional stuff that really delayed the whole project getting completed. So things that slow your book down to a crawl after the words are created. It's thinking about things like including images, thinking about custom layouts and worrying that the layout and the look and feel is really going to make that much of a difference. It's aiming for a minimum page count, thinking to yourself that, oh, I have to get a certain amount of pages in the book, otherwise it's not a real book, when really that's not an issue for the readers. Don't care about that at all. If you can comprehensively answer it in 50 pages, why do you think you need to get to 120 pages worth of content? And then the last one is probably the most often one that we see is additional rounds of editing. The people aren't willing to accept that there are mistakes in books, and that's just a factor of life. For a period of time, I was the Apple News app on the phone. Occasionally would scroll through that before I realised that was just doom scrolling and stopped doing it. But for a time I was taking screenshots of all of the typos that you saw in articles of the major global publications. So the same with books. Books go to print with typos in them all the time. And this is even traditional publishing books that cost tens of thousands of dollars and have hundreds of hours worth of editing. So the book that you're creating here, the book is not the product. You're really looking at getting this out to people as quick as possible. typos or issues within the content can always be fixed further downstream. It's not going to move the needle as long as it passes a minimum threshold of quality, which everyone can achieve in one round of editing. As long as it passes that, then all of the additional steps, it's just slowing down the process. It's just this kind of procrastination of or fear of getting it out of the door. The key is to get it written and get it out in front of people, and then pivot based on that feedback or make changes based on that feedback. Don't allow this kind of perfectionism to stop it getting out of the door, or don't allow adding extra chrome like videos. Don't allow that to stop it getting out of the door either. So distractions, less about the people distracting you, more about you distracting yourself with a kind of shiny object syndrome of wanting to add other things to the mix. The next beneficial constraint that it's worth thinking about is the constraint of a deadline. So again, the necessity is the mother of invention. If you make a strong external commitment that this is going to get done, something that you can't wriggle out of or just renege on, then that's very much going to make sure that it gets done, because there are consequences to that not happening. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing it. We're just coming at the November 21, so now we're coming into a time where there's many more live events going on than in the last couple of years. People are now having more deadlines and things in the calendar that people are leading towards. So it could be an option to give yourself a publicly committed external deadline, which means that you need to get this completed by. A kind of a less pressured situation might be just committing to the group of people that you want to send this to by sending a note to the handful of customers that know, like, and trust you the best. Say that this project is something that you want to get finished in a certain amount of time and you'd like them to review it first. Again, put some external commitment on getting this done. Now, none of this is as strong as going to an escrow account and putting $1,000 in there, and if you don't complete it, it goes to a charity that you hate. None of this is a very strong driver, but it's all the little things that might help you get past the line, because you don't want the embarrassment or you don't want to have to justify to someone else that you didn't get it done. Again, assume that you give yourself a reasonable deadline in order to get it done in the first place, something that makes sense. But having those things there, having the commitment in place, is just another time-based constraint rather than a scope-based constraint that makes it more likely that you'll get it done. Another one is a pre-release list. So if you start collecting leads based on a pre-release or an upcoming release, that's another great motivator for getting it done by a certain point in time. Again, all of these little psychological tricks are just constraints that we can put in place to make the project more likely that it will get completed. And if you can make it 10% more likely, then hey, it's worth the effort of thinking about those things today rather than not doing it and letting the project slide for longer and longer. So the last thing I want to talk about briefly then is this idea of getting it done and just getting it out there. It's kind of the whole point of the beneficial constraints mindset, is to structure the process as much as possible as to get it out there. Now, obviously, people who are working with us, there's a certain amount of built-in time frame and a built-in constraint, because we're trying to drive the process through and move you forward without allowing you to get too distracted and either delayed or scope creeped into the project not getting completed. So if you're not working with us, you're doing it yourself, you need to kind of construct those things. So validate the scope of the book in the first place. Just make sure that you're not kind of creeping outside of the things that you want to deliver. Limit yourself to 2 rounds of editing. And in fact, on the original slides, I just had 1 round, so a little bit more generous, 2 rounds of editing. But any more than that, and you just really, you're making minor changes, but you're making a major delay to the whole project. So 2 rounds of editing. Really limit the amount of additional things that you're adding to the book, the additional chrome, particularly in the version 1. Again, the benefits of self-publishing, of publishing on the modern platforms, is this isn't you need to go to a publishing company and get a contract to print 10,000 books. You can print 10 versions of the first book and then make changes based off feedback. Changes are very easy to do. Again, you don't need to get tens of thousands of worth of resources in order to make a change. Changes are easy to iterate. So for this first version, absolutely concentrate on getting it out the door. The kind of minimum viable product approach of getting a book in the hands of the people that it's actually going to resonate with and that you can help and work with. And then look for options to make some external commitments, or build a pre-release list, or commit to speaking at a particular event about the book and use that as the time frame. Another one on the deadline scope, depending on which business you're in, certain businesses like accountants or CPAs is a great example. There's certain points in the year, mainly around tax time or deadlines, the business peaks or dips. So having that, understanding what the calendar is coming up, understanding all of these deadlines that aren't necessarily deadlines specific to your book, but deadlines specific to your industry, by which your book is way more likely to be effective, then having that as a deadline is also another great benefit. And in fact, the release template video that we've got talks about some of those things in a little bit more detail. It just allows you to write down a kind of like a content calendar of the year ahead, or the schedule of commitments that you've got, in order to write back from that point and understand the timeline of when you need to have the title dialed in, when you need to have the outline done, when you need to start recording, how much time you've got for editing, when you need to kick off the process to get the cover done. So all of these things, it just builds into a bit of a content calendar template. But having that as a trigger, having that triggered by some external things, is a great way of adding that deadline-based scope if you don't have any kind of internal deadlines. So with that, as always, if you've got any questions, shoot us a note. There's more resources at 90minutebooks.com, or you can email me or call into the office with any questions. We'll try to answer as many as possible. And then if you'd like to jump on a strategy call, we're always happy to do that as well. So just shoot an email or call into the office and we can get that scheduled. Okay. With that, we are moving on to Mindset 8. So I will see you there. Hey everyone, welcome back. Stuart Bell here for the final time, our exercise for Mindset 8. So we're dealing with the Beyond the Book mindset, and this particular video that we're going to run through is based on a field guide that I wrote with Dean called the 5 Simple Steps. It's the first 5 things that you can do to promote your book after it's out of the, once it's created. Interesting enough, the reason that we created this was because in some of the consulting and the strategy calls we do with clients after they've launched, these 5 things across the board were actually quite often being missed by people. So it's a real eye-opener that some of the things that we'd assumed were pretty straightforward and perhaps that everyone was doing, in reality they were getting missed, even by people who are actually clients. So we brought together this field guide as a pointer for just the 5 straightforward things, all but the last one is pretty much no cost. So these are, there's something here for everyone, basically. If you've got to this point already, then you should have your book complete. If you've jumped ahead to this one and you're taking a look before it's finished, then the only bit of advice that I'd get is, welcome, I love the enthusiasm, but don't let this distract you from actually getting the work done of the earlier mindsets. So with that, let's dive in and look at the 5 things that we're going to talk about. So we're going to look at updating your various signatures. We're going to talk about existing customers. We're going to talk about prospects that you've got already. We've got talking about this idea of complementary non-competing businesses. And then the 5th one, like I mentioned, this one is a cost one, but we're going to look at some straightforward Facebook and print ad options that, again, people might not necessarily have thought about. This field guide is actually available as a download, so head over to the URL that's on the screen now, or that's in the book, so download a copy of it, because there's more, the field report itself goes into a little bit more detail in certain things, although obviously the video is useful because we can talk about things in a slightly different way. So when we talk about signatures, the reason for including this one is that now your book's complete, you've got the no cost option to add it to all of the things where words about you already appear. So whether this is an email signature, a social media signature, There's the option to include it in profile services like About Me. There's services like LinkedIn. All of these areas where your signature already exists is an opportunity to include the book. If you've got staff, then there's the opportunity to include it in their email signature as well, the email signature that the organisation uses. Now, including the book is the words that go along with including the book. It's not about self-promotion. It's not about identifying yourself as an author. It's about putting the words that are in the title. The thing that you know from the earlier mindsets is the thing that resonates with people, putting it there front and center so that people who you're engaging with is the opportunity for them to see those words and think, oh, that is something that I need some help with, or that is a question that I've had, and then follow through. Now, again, the devil's always in the details. So when you think about where those elements are going, just think a little bit about the context in which people are usually seeing that message. So if it's a profile in social media, that's usually cold traffic who don't necessarily know you, as opposed to an email signature to existing customers, two different audiences. So the words that you use might be around lead generation in the profile sense, so people who don't know you, whereas in the email sense, it might be a little bit more referral based. So again, just think about the context of where that's being used, but in terms of the channels in which it's being used, all of this real estate is kind of there already, so why not add a message to it? The super signatures are something you might have heard me mention before. This is, you'll see it on the bottom of some of our messages. Here are 4 ways that we can help you today. And those 4 ways go from the let's get started and find out more, let's take an easy first step and find out more information, to completing the scorecard, to jumping on for a strategy call, to getting started. So the super signature is a way of adding in the 3 or 4 most relevant steps that someone can take in a context of when you don't know what they're particularly thinking. So you're just using that space to present an easy way for people to get started in a channel that already exists. Existing customers. So this is a great one. This is probably one that's the most untapped or underutilized. So people think of existing customers as they're already in the fold and they're already in process, so we don't necessarily do anything with them. The next stage that people think about is referrals. People tend to think about getting recommendations from existing customers to people who they might be able to help, which that's great as well. And the book, as we talked about in the earlier mindset, is a great way of not going back to existing customers and asking for them to give up their name and email address of their friends that you can do business with, but instead presenting them the book as something that they can give to their friends. Hey, if you hear someone talking about wanting to their year-end, their accountants ask them for their year-end planning as we're coming up to Thanksgiving. If you hear someone talk about this specific thing, then here's a copy of the book to give them. If you're at Thanksgiving and you hear someone talking about their concern about weight that they might put on or their diet, here's a copy of the book that you can give them. So the referral, orchestrating that referral route, if you can make it as specific as possible so the person's likely to kind of recognize that there's a referral opportunity, and then give them the book to pass to the person, it just means that they don't have to give up their details, friends' details, and you've kind of preceded the idea about a conversation that might happen at this time of year. The thing that people don't think about in terms of existing customers is that opportunity to build rapport. So these are the people that know, like, and trust you the most already out of everyone in your world. These are the guys who are happily paying you money. So by saying to them, hey, we've just written a book, it's super valuable, I'd love to get your feedback on it, or I'd love to get you an advanced copy, or I'd love for you to see it first. Using that as an opportunity to start the conversation, it's a perfect way of re-engaging people who might be in process but aren't necessarily in dialogue. So your book, and making the people feel good about it, not that you're sending an email to them and saying, hey, I'm an author now, you should go buy a copy of my book, but instead bringing them into the family a bit more, bringing them into the fold and saying, hey, I'd love to, you're the type of person that I can help the most. It's exactly your situation that made me think about writing this book in this way. Words that make them feel warm and fuzzy, for want of a better term, then that's the opportunity to get that re-engagement and spark that conversation, which could lead to referrals or could lead to more business or could just lead to interesting conversations. So that's existing customers. Prospects are obviously a group of people that people think about a lot because they're typically top of mind. But with prospects, there's actually two types of prospects that we're interested in talking to. There's the group of people who are warm prospects, and there's the group of people who are cold prospects. So the warm ones are people who are recently joined the list, who are maybe engaging with the content anyway. And those ones, there's the opportunity of reaching out to them and saying, hey, I've just written this book. There's a point in chapter 3 that I think really resonates with your situation. Here's a link to it. And again, this idea of putting an intelligent link, putting an intelligent flag on a link so you know that people open it rather than having to make them opt in again. For warm prospects, that's the best approach because we don't want to make them jump through another hoop of opting in because you know their name and email address details already. But that's a little technicality on the CRM that you're using. Whether or not you do that, just using this as the re-engagement and then following up a day or two later with either a spear email or with an email that leads them closer towards the action, that reminds them that they should take this next step. The fact that the book exists and you've got these warm prospects on the list, a great opportunity to reach out to that group of people. The second group of people are the cold prospects on the list. Always makes me laugh when you hear people refer to them as dead leads. Again, anecdotal story. My brother, made people know already, is a yacht broker down here in Fort Lauderdale. So when he moved brokerages, one of the previous brokers was leaving, and there was actually literally a box labeled dead leads, which we took and then crafted an email to send to those people, just explaining that broker was no longer working. I think actually he passed away, but that's by the by. We had these dead leads and reached out to them, and then there is a significant boat contract that came just from that work. So the idea of dead leads is ridiculous. The idea that people, the time isn't right for them, that absolutely makes sense, but it makes sense in a way that enables you to deal with them in a different way. So for those people, sending them a spear question saying, or 9-word email saying, hey, are you still interested in whatever it is that they opted in for the first place? Then that's a way of re-engaging with them. And for the ones that do raise their hand and say yes, then sending them the book as a way of warming them up again, rather than jumping straight on them and saying, hey, well, we should get on a call. Sending them the book is a great way of kind of building that rapport, because if we think back to the minimum viable commitment chart of rapport versus ask, and then the threshold of willingness, that crossover point for dead leads, for cold leads, for leads that have been that haven't expressed any interest in doing anything for a long time, we need to warm them up and get them to that point. And then of course, once we've done that re-engagement activity, a month later we can always send the book to the rest of the list. This isn't that we're only taking this approach, but if we can warm those people up first, then again it might be a way of kind of engaging the people who are the more likely to do something than those that are less likely. So again, treating everyone as a 5-star prospect. And the link down below is to Email Mastery. I mentioned this in the previous video. Email Mastery is a great way to learn more about this idea of conversational conversions. Okay, so complementary non-competing businesses. This is the idea that the Venn diagram of your ideal prospects and another company's ideal prospects cross over at some point, and you can provide value to this organization by sharing your book with their clients. Now, the reason that we say complementary non-competing is obviously it's difficult to do this with a competing business, and there's no value in doing it in a non-complementary business. So what we're looking for is the type of organization where their clients are very similar to your clients. So they might have a similar need, they might have a similar demographic element to them. By stepping up and talking to that other business owner, by offering them value in providing this book, by not making it about you and going and saying, hey, I've got this book, I'm great, you should give it to your clients. Instead saying, hey, there's some very valuable information that is relevant to your clients as well. And if you, other business owner, position it as you've reached out to me to provide this information for them, then they're going to be more grateful to you as being their guy that's helping them out. it's going to be more beneficial for me because it's a warm introduction. So overall, it's a win-win when we let our ego go and be able to work with this complementary, non-competing business in a way that adds value both to their business and their customers, you knowing that you're going to get the secondary benefit of introducing that group of people to your world. So there's a few ways of doing this. I mean, the easiest way is to just give a copy of the book and say, hey, here, you can hand this out to anyone that you feel it's beneficial for. The more complicated way is doing a variation of your book that's kind of like a joint venture and allowing the other business to put a forward or an introduction or co-branding it with their picture on the front. Remember, all of this is about losing our ego. The book isn't the product. We don't care about the book. We care about starting the conversation. So if we can get in front of that whole audience in a way that is a warm introduction, just by allowing the other person to stick their face on the front of it, then everyone's a winner. So complementary non-competing businesses is a great opportunity, particularly in certain industries where you do get a lot of crossover, like the accountants and CPAs and printers and office managers, all of those areas supporting small businesses. There's a huge crossover in that industry. The same with wedding events and florists and photographers and cake providers and venue providers and I was going to say pavilion providers, but tent providers. All of that same group of people, the customers are the same, but they're complementary, not competing. So definitely worth thinking about. Okay, so the fifth one on the list, it has some money associated with it, so obviously we left this to last. But this is the idea of print or Facebook ads. So the fact that you've got a book now means that you've got a very compelling way to start a conversation with someone that allows you to collect their details in a non-threatening, giving way, starting the conversation by providing value. So Facebook is an obvious one because there's so many demographically addressable markets there, and the benefit that a book cover, Facebook have some limitations on the text that you can place in an ad, but if it's a book cover, then it doesn't count as text because it's the image of the object. So it's a good way of additionally getting your message of the headline of the call to action in the image. That's a very clear and the feed stopper approach that we talked about in the earlier mindset, it very much stops the feed of someone who's scrolling by and sees something that's relevant to a problem or a challenge that they're having. So you can demographically target it. That's great. As I mentioned, the fact that the words on the cover don't count towards any limit, that's great. The one benefit of Facebook is that it is so targetable. Now, personally, I can't stand Facebook. It's a problem to society for many reasons. The dark side or the downside of it, at least, but it's unavoidable that their demographic platform is the best that's out there. Google Ads is another option if there is an intention-based search. So as someone's searching for the answer to a question, you've got the opportunity to get in front of them there. But these ad platforms, LinkedIn as well, actually, this isn't on the list because it's a much smaller platform. But for certain B2B industries, that might be very lucrative because you're really getting in front of the people. So anyway, all of this to say, don't miss the opportunity for a small amount of ad spend if you can target it to the group as specifically as possible, because the way of starting the conversation just by offering a copy of the book, nothing else. You don't need to get clever with the copy. You don't need a long form sales letter. You don't need to make people jump through hoops. Just offer them a copy of the book in a way that you can capture their details and start the conversation. Then an ad is very worthwhile. And that leads us into print media. So print is often overlooked because everyone's in a digital mindset. But actually, if you've got particularly a geographic-based business, if you're trying to serve people in a local area, if you're a real estate agent, if you're offering music lessons, if you're doing a lawn service, anything that's geographically targeted, there's often some very cheap print ads to be had for the magazines and the publications that serve that local area. Now, obviously, you've got niche-specific ones as well, so a woodworking magazine or a Learn to Play the Piano magazine. All of these niche-specific ones might also be a benefit, but I wanted to share with you a success an ad that we were running in Success Magazine as a different approach to what traditionally you might think of as a magazine ad. So the idea here is that we want to give people, even if they do nothing else, we want to make this ad the most valuable piece of real estate that's in that particular magazine. So you can see the headline that we've got there is talking about the 9-word email, which is a particular email strategy that we've got. And the copy of the ad actually describes exactly what it is. And the call to action at the end is, if this was valuable, then we've got several other strategies in a free copy of the Email Mastery book. So just head over to the website or call the free recorded message to get a free there's no cost associated, get a free version of the book. The idea being that we want to give as much value as possible to build that rapport, to motivate and compel people to take the next step. And the fact that we have a book now means that we can do all of that and keep these little micro commitments, these minimum viable commitments for each individual asset. The ad in this case, the back cover copy in the bookcase. All of these things, now that your book exists, just open up all of these opportunities to really lead with the giving hand and start meaningful conversations with the people who you can best help in a way that makes them feel at ease, positions you as the authority, gives them some value, and then a clear step to move forward with the process. So with that, again, I just want to say thanks for making it this far. I'm equally happy that you've made it this far and my voice made it this far. It's definitely getting a little bit croaky. As with every other video that we've gone through, we're super excited to be able to help people either directly by doing it for you or by supporting you by answering questions if we can do that. So if we can do this for you, I genuinely believe this is the most cost-effective way of getting it done, because you're leveraging all of our expertise to get this out of the way and not leave it to yourself to have to get caught up in all of these issues that we've described in the video. So if we can be of help and do it for you, then head over to 90-Minute Books and follow the Get Started links. If you've just got some questions about either our process or your book generally, then by all means feel free to reach out to me. The Stuart at 90-Minute Books is the email address. The office number there's the phone number there, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. A strategy call, we're always happy to do, so shoot a message through and we can arrange a time to talk on a strategy call. Again, whether you're working directly with us or whether you just want to ask some questions, we're happy to help. We're super passionate about getting this opportunity out to as many people as possible. The fact that books have been democratized, that there's a definite technological advantage with being able to get it out there, but there's still the perceived value with having it and the ability to start a conversation and how it positions you as the expert and their trusted advisor. This is something that really, in this moment, in this year, that it's the best opportunity to build your list, build credibility, start those conversations and really, really move people forward towards being able to help them. So with that, thank you again. Look forward to hearing what your book's about. Hi everybody, welcome to the exercise video for Mindset 6. We are going to look at the content template that we use here at 90-Minute Books. So there's a link to download the file just in the book below this video link. So obviously download that and use that as much as you want. We're going to quickly run through a couple of slides just to demonstrate it, so don't need to download it before you listen to the next few minutes of me describing it. So the thing that we're trying to achieve with the content template is really to make the content creation as streamlined as possible. It really is the case that the creating the content should be the easiest part of this whole process, because all you're doing is kind of filling in the gaps of things that we've already decided. So we already know the language because we've got a good idea of who we're talking to. We already know where we're leading them because we've got the call to action. We already know the individual elements that we're including because we've written a purposeful outline. So the content is really just plugging in the gaps for everything that we've kind of built to this point. So with that being said, the things that we're trying to achieve is collecting our best thinking together. It's the opportunity to, before we start putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, collect together the additional information, the anecdotes, the evidence, the stories, the case studies, the examples that best illustrate each of these points, these chapters, these headings that we've decided are the ones that should be included. So that the actual writing of it, like I say, is something that subconsciously we've already thought about because we've filled in these boxes so that we know that we're ready to go. People who know the 9-minute book process know that we record all of the content in order to get the words. So particularly if you're using that same approach, recording and just trying to go to wing it, even if you're very familiar with the subject, is very, very difficult, because holding that train of thought and making sure that you cover all of the elements you want to cover, it's very challenging, because your thought process, particularly if you've been in business for any amount of time, and there's many, many other things in your head, like we were talking about in the scope video, there's many, many other things that might need to be brought out because you know the bigger picture, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, there might be some things that you skip over because they're so basic to you that you forget that you actually should include them in the content. So particularly if you're recording the content in order to get the words on the page, then absolutely make sure that you take some time and go through the content template so that everything is there in front of you, and you're not going to be in a situation where you miss things and then either they never get included or you have to go back and fix it afterwards. So on the screen at the moment, you can see an example of the content template. As I mentioned, there's links to download this in the book, so feel free to download a copy. This explainer text at the top of the page is the explainer text that we send to clients. So again, I just wanted to include it here so you've got all of the information. But you can see that at the top of the page, we're restating what the title, the subheading, and the call to action are, so that we can be reminded when we're recording the question that we're trying to answer and where we're ending up. So front and center, we've got that information as a reminder of where we're going. Then for each chapter, we've got the opportunity to add the detail as the reminder of the bits and pieces that we want to include. So there's no real limit or best practice for what's included here, particularly if you're recording the content. And again, this is the framework in which we use this document. Particularly if you're recording the content, then you just want to write 1 or 2 word reminders so that you can very easily, when you're doing the recording, look down and understand and know what that next point is, without falling into the trap, which we also see quite often, of people writing sentences or paragraphs as reminders, and then what they end up doing is just reading that statement off, and then the brain shuts down. They don't elaborate anymore because kind of psychologically they've answered that question or said enough words, and what it turns into then is very shallow content. So definitely the best approach is to write the bullet points rather than the sentences on what you want to include. And whether you're recording the content or writing the content, the same applies. The aim of this document is just to make sure you're comprehensively fulfilling the promise of the title and what you've decided to do in the outline. This content template isn't necessarily there to, this isn't part of the writing process of the actual document itself or the recording process. This is a thing to make sure that everything is included. It's the content template, it's not the actual content. So include as much as possible. One of the things I would recommend, there's only obviously one page of the document on the screen, but you can see as we get to the next slide, the duplication in the other chapters. So there is something to be said about formalizing and having a structure within your book that's easy to follow. So one of the best examples of this, and the easiest, is a scorecard type book. So take a look again at the book blueprint scorecard, and what you'll see is each chapter is structured very repetitively. The layout is very similar, because what we're trying to do is make it easy for people to comprehend, easy for people to understand, so that once they've kind of seen a couple of the chapters, they're used to the layout and understand what's coming next. They're not having to read it and then kind of put the format in some context. So that repetition is beneficial. Now, obviously, your book probably isn't going to be as formulaic as a scorecard book, but there's still the opportunity to have that structure in the layout of the book and repeat things. So start off with the intro to the chapter, the overview, the restating of what the particular problem is, then go into what the answers are, then potentially go into anecdotally what the solutions are, then maybe go into how you can help them or how you've helped people in the past, and then maybe finish off with the case study. So by repeating the format, and again, this is more art than science, but repeating the format much better than if you were to do the same exercise on the fly and then completely mix up that order. You might have the same content in there, but if it was all over the place, the reader just doesn't get as, or you make it harder work for the reader rather than, again, just thinking about thinking about the layout and the structure at this stage before you actually get started getting the words down. The last thing to say about the structure of the document is just that the last two columns that you see on the right hand side are talking about the estimated duration and the time guideline. Now this is very much an element of, or the reason we have this is very much because of the way that we record. So again, what we want to do is make sure that people are giving the right amount of attention to each chapter, because we don't want people coming on for an hour's recording and then answering the first two questions in 5 minutes and then having to string out all of the rest of it. So what we'll do on the outline document is break down how many minutes we're expecting each section to be, and then we're typically starting recording on the hour, so we'll put a time stamp, a time guide against it, so that people aren't having to mentally add up the math of how long they've been recording each one. They can just keep a track of it as they go through. Again, not essential. You might be creating yours in a completely different way, but if you are trying to think of that idea of, okay, I want to make each chapter about this percentage of the book, each chapter balanced in the amount of value that I'm creating, or if there's one chapter that's definitely smaller and another one that's definitely bigger, again, I want to take a note of that now to make sure that my end result matches what I'm anticipating going in. And if it doesn't, I can validate that and say, okay, well, it didn't do that for a reason, or it didn't do that because of a mistake that was made. Either I missed a section, or actually I was being a little bit superficial in this chapter where I anticipated talking about it in a little bit more detail. So the time guidelines and the estimated duration is just that added framework that we've got, particularly because we're recording, but it's that added framework to help make sure that the interviewer and the author are on the same page in their expectation of how much stuff is being recorded for each chapter. And you can see that there's just finished off with the next steps. That's just a reminder of what our next steps are, what we want people to do in that call to action, so that as we get towards the end of the book and we've covered the action steps that they can take, so we've given them some value, and the specific next steps to do now, again, all of this is just designed to make sure that we've really got something valuable that that people will read, resonate with, and then be much more likely to take that next step, which is the thing that we want. So link on the screen there just to download that content template. Again, the link's in the book, so grab it from either source. As always, if you've got any questions, feel free to shoot them through to us. Either head over to 90 Minute Books and there's some other additional resources there, or our contact details, or by all means shoot me an email to Stuart at 90 Minute Books, or give the office a call, and we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. Okay, the next chapter we're running on to is outside of the content now, the creation piece. Now we're running into a couple of the last two mindsets of those different elements that aren't necessarily about the book creation themselves, but they're two things that can really make the difference to getting the job done, making sure it's complete, and then once it is done, what to do with it. So excited that we're getting this far through the process. Well done for committing to get this far, and I'll see you in the next one.